Mr. B and I come to visit.
Hey, Murph.
What is it, Brogan of the Daydreamcast?
I think we need a guest on this episode.
Okay. We haven't had a lot of guests around here.
Well, we're gonna guest it up. We need a YouTube star as big as Jake Paul.
A huge name in the industry.
Yes.
Some sort of Renaissance man. He sings, he dances.
Oh, yeah.
He has a podcast called Essays and Espressos with other YouTubers. Who could this be?
Who could this be? You're talking him up so much.
Given the name is Essays with YouTubers, I'm gonna guess his name is like AesirAesthetics.
Oh, yeah. I should have picked that, name, though. I regret choosing the name that I did choose. Because it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything.
Why'd you choose it?
I just thought it sounded cool.
It does.
You should say your name.
Hi, I'm Aesir. AesirAesthetics on YouTube.
That's awesome. Tell us about yourself.
Put me on the spot.
Well,
there.
we're primarily a film focused network of podcasts, so not everyone looks up video essays on video games and lore.
Well, I'm very much against movies. I think movies are terrible. Some are pretty good, though.
I agree. This is a good take.
Okay. Yes. Yes. What about books?
Oh, books used to be good.
Books
they
used
haven't
to be-
been good in a while. Ever since audiobooks came, books have kind of been on the way out for me.
Okay.
I agree.
What about
These are all good takes.
what about books adapted from video games?
Have you read like the Doom novelization and stuff like that?
I kind of make it a habit of reading video game novelizations. I've read the adaptations of the first and second God of War, and they're both terrible.
Who would do that? Who would make a novel on God of War?
I don't know, but they're both terrible.
Did you read the Bioshock novel? There is a Bioshock novel.
No, I tried looking for it, but my local library or bookstore didn't have it.
Yeah, my understanding with book novelizations for games is that they're either they go completely insane, like the Doom novelizations, or they're just like meh.
It just depends on how much stuff there is in the game, because if it's a very story-focused game, then I suppose you could just directly put in the dialogue. But with something like Doom, like what characterization are you putting in there? There's no cast in Doom.
To talk about other YouTubers real quick, Super Bunny Hop did a video on novels, and he talked about the Hitman novels, like the Codename 47 stuff and all that. And he talked about how interesting it was that the writer kept talking about food and locations like extended amounts of time. You know what I mean?
So it was written by George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, no, but like also in my head I was like, that's a very James Bond novel thing. And
yeah.
I don't think he made the connection where it's like Hitman to James Bond, but like, yeah, if you read a James Bond book, it's like, I wouldn't say 80% of it, but like there's a good percent of it that's like James Bond's eating a nice cream, thing in the hotel, blah blah blah. It's great.
Yeah. So welcome to the Daydreamcast. We occasionally talk about video games.
All right, it's good to be here.
When we have a new guest on, we kind of like to get their vibe for the audience. What sort of video games draw you in? What's the flame to your moth?
I used to be big into we'll be talking about Bioshock later. That's a big game for me. I used to be big into like these sort of commercially, critically successful AAA games.
Okay.
Not so much anymore. I feel like I've grown away from that, and I'm more interested in the tiny little screws on spaceships than I am the spaceship itself. So when I see, for example, an indie game where you're stationary and you're in a basement and there's a monster in the basement and you need to figure out how to defeat this monster but you can't move. And every time you look away from the monster comes closer to you. I'm like, ooh, that's an interesting sort of parameter to design a game around. How is this going to play? And it was pretty good. It's called Don't Look at the Red Fridge in the Basement, I think. So those sorts of highly experimental indie titles are kind of where I live these days.
Yeah, more mechanically focused.
Yeah, and you're a game designer yourself now, right?
Oh,
you made
yes.
Snail, and you're also like going into other things. So that mechanics aspect is probably informing a lot of how you learn about how to design games now, right?
Yeah. Well, for Snail, I feel kind of bad saying this, because whenever you put something out there that you made yourself, whenever people criticize it, the easiest thing to say is, well, I wasn't really trying. But for Snail, it is a little bit true. It wasn't just something I farted out and then, if people don't like it and I go, well, I could have done better if I tried. This was very explicitly, I'm testing out these different kinds of locking off content and these sorts of progression gauntlets. So like Zelda always had those dungeons. I like to refer to that sort of segment just as a gauntlet. You see it also in Silent Hill, where you're just on the overworld and then you go into like the apartment building or the hospital. That's just a gauntlet in my eyes. The Zelda dungeons, they're just gauntlets. So I wanted, how about I do one gauntlet that's like a horror segment, one gauntlet that recreates the setup and direction from PT, where it's just this constantly looping level. How about one gauntlet where it's more ambient and you're just walking around a desolate village? And I wanted to do as many different versions of that as I possibly could. And the story that I had in mind, it was only like, it was just supposed to be vague stuff, but then I kind of got into it at the end, and you can tell if you actually play the game that like 90% of the story is like in the final like third, because that's the point where I was really like, oh no, you know what, I can do a story. I like this. I like where this is going. But at the beginning, it's just like, it's just anything and everything and like weird references to other games.
So would you say you were making that game more for yourself than for an audience?
Well, I'm making a big game right now, a bigger game than Snail, and that's the game that all the systems from Snail came from. I was just designing that. I wanted to do like a low, sort of a scaled back Link to the Past title. Not as scaled back as Snail, a little bit bigger, but because I hadn't... So one of the biggest problems when you're designing is if your mechanics, if your systems and your objects, if they don't interact really well, that can be a monster, because you're just going to have to redo the entire game over and over again until it gets working. So I decided I had hit like a crossroad where 90% of the mechanics the game is going to be utilizing have been created, but I have no idea how they actually interact with one another. And with Snail, I thought I should create like a demo game specifically to see how these mechanics work together and to fix them where they don't work together, so that when I build the game on top of it, I'm not going to encounter any issues, because I know how it plays out when it's actually in your hands. And you can actually see in Snail, if you test it, like enemy patrol routes, the reason they're terrible and the reason the combat is terrible is because the system that I had designed, I had to basically throw it in the trash just 2 weeks or so before I made Snail, because it just wasn't working, and I had to create this really dumb scaled back version of it. Same with the keys. There's one section in the game where I've gotten a lot of comments on where people are like, I'm locked in the basement, what am I supposed to do? And you collect keys in that arena to open up different doors. The idea is you're supposed to use all the keys on this final door, and then the keys sort of get used up so they don't clutter your inventory, because there's no way to actually drop them. But I didn't communicate that properly enough. So like those sorts of tiny little, you could have fixed that if you just put like 4 locks, and every time you use a key, one of the locks disappears. Those sorts of little touches are where the most valuable feedback has come from.
Okay. Yeah, I totally get the idea of doing something more as a demo to see if, like, can it be done. That's a big thing in animation. Anytime you see, like, an animated short from some sort of studio like Pixar or something, it's generally them testing out, like, new animation tech for a larger project.
So like that volcano short they did, was that like, we want to see how we can do this for Moana or something?
Yeah, almost certainly. Or like there was a short sandpiper about like a little bird on a beach, and that was them testing like sand physics for a later picture. I forget which one it was.
Probably Moana 2.
Yeah. Well, Moana 2's not out yet.
No, I meant Moana also.
All right.
Yeah, I hate sand. I hate designing sand because
okay.
there's no way you can't
because
make
it's
it
rough and coarse and gets everywhere.
I wasn't gonna do the meme, but it's such a nightmare to design, especially in like 8-bit or 16-bit pixel styles, because it never looks good. It always looks like, I don't know.
I think something like
maybe
that.
We shouldn't.
You need like good sound design. You need some good crunchy sand.
Yeah, that's probably right. You just need to map some object on there to like denote like a good sort of sound when you walk on it. Yeah, that's another thing I learned. What?
No, he just designs games.
I was gonna say that's another thing I learned is that like 90% of the game is the audio design, which sounds just like. Obviously, that's not true, but it also is true, because if the audio design is off, you can make the best game in the world, it won't work. It's just it needs to hit right. Like, well, like I said, that's another thing that doing Snail taught me, where I was like, I need some kind of sound to indicate that things are moving in the menu. How about this? And it's just like a blink. And it sounds so rough when I listen to it now, like almost a year removed from the game.
Yeah. No, because you're just kind of looking for a placeholder. You're not, like, thinking about the aesthetic, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also just loud, and I didn't put in any system, because I thought, like, 50 people were going to play it. It's gotten way more popular than that. So I wasn't looking at, like, oh, this is like a serious self-contained product. It was more just, this is an experiment with these mechanics that I've already designed. And I'm like, if I'd known so many people were going to play it, I would have done it better. And I am currently, because I've updated the engine, and I've created like 40-50% of the next game. It's like, it's in that sort of, I could probably release it as like an alpha, and I just need to script a few more sequences, and then you have like an alpha build of that game. But I'm taking Snail, I'm putting it in the updated engine, just to like have something. Like I want to get to know the Steam interface when you're releasing games and stuff. Before I Anyways, moving away from Snail. I feel like I've just hogged up the entire podcast so far.
Oh, it's fine. You're a new voice being heard in our little network for the first time, so it's good to get the gist. And we haven't really spoken with a game dev before, so it's good to learn that sort of stuff. So we can move on to Whatcha Playin.
What did you play, Murph?
What have I played? I've got two slightly more high-profile indie games than I typically bring.
Wow.
A few episodes ago, I remarked how I was looking for a sort of a train game, a traveling vibe game, and Bro recommended Spiritfarer, which I did recall. I think this was like first revealed way back at the first revealing of the like Xbox One, or no, what are they on now? The Xbox One X?
Yeah.
No idea. I just know that you wanted a train game where you saw different passengers and learned their life story.
Yes.
I was like, that sounds like that.
Yes. So
no, it's the Xbox Series X, I believe.
The monolith. So Spiritfarer is pretty much exactly what I was looking for. The basic gist of this game is that you are a young girl named Stella, and you and your cat have been chosen as the new Spiritfarers. The spirits that guide souls to the afterlife. And you sort of exist in this giant ocean that's, I guess, limbo to a degree, and you go around picking up souls and sort of bringing them comfort in their last moments before bringing them to the thereafter, whatever that may be. And it's got this great hand-drawn animation. Every animation in this game is so lively and energetic and cute. It's a very cute game. And your primary gameplay loop is that it is essentially a farming game. You have a huge boat, and you set up various kind of resource nodes. You set up farms, you set up orchards and smelteries and stuff in order to craft certain things to make meals for your passengers. If you give them like their favorite food often, they'll talk to you and you'll raise like affinity and such. Or you'll craft like new houses on the boat for the spirits to live in according to like their needs. And then the game, you know, because it is about death and such, it does get pretty dang heavy. It deals in it's cute aesthetic hides a lot of emotional depth. You know, it deals with themes of depression and suicide, or you know, one of your passengers is actually your character's uncle, who was a union boss for a lumber mill, and one of the things he requests to have made on the boat is a sawmill so he can, you know, do his trade. And he, like, talks to you and says, like, oh, you know, you gotta learn how to do the sawmill right. You don't want to, you know, lose a finger or an arm, or... And he trails off. And you're like, oh. And then, you know, once the spirit feels they are at peace, once you've like finished their quest line, you bring them to the Everdoor, which is this place in the middle of the ocean, and you say goodbye to them, and they're effectively out of the game. And I've done that 3 times so far, and it's pretty emotional each time. So far, the passengers are a lot of grandmas, I will say. Each spirit sort of turns into an animal once they're on the ship. And so far I've had Grandma Snake, Grandma Hedgehog, Grandma Owl. They are, like I said, it's a very cute game, but then once like Grandma Hedgehog starts having like dementia, that's a problem.
But did it deliver on what you were looking for?
Yes.
In a game?
So you're basically traveling from island to island, and that's basically the bulk of your playtime. Like, the islands have resources like trees to cut down or ore to mine. The actual gameplay is the travel, because that's when you move around your ship and like harvest your wheat, or smelt your ingots, or talk to the passengers, or cook meals. And then like there's great weather effects when it rains. Like we were talking about, the sound design of the rain is great. And sometimes you can just sit down and vibe and look at the ocean and the islands passing by. It's a good game. I like it a lot. I'm probably going to finish it. I think right now it's kind of reaching a point where I may be getting a little tired of the loop. I looked up online, and evidently, like, to finish the game, it's a 30-hour playtime.
Whoa!
Whoa!
Which seems a lot for this type of game, because it's gotten to a point where it's like, everything I need to craft requires aluminum ingots now. And I'm like, where do I get aluminum? I've been to every island. I haven't found any aluminum. And then I looked up a guide, and it's like, oh, you need to finish this character's quest line. Like, well, I haven't finished this character's quest line because they require a house that needs marble, and I haven't found marble. You know?
Ugh.
So if you're averse to that sort of like crafting gameplay loop, I can definitely see it being off-putting, but I think the story and the characters really carry it.
All right.
Wow.
I'm interested. You self-censored you almost said the F word. Is this like a cleaner podcast than I'm used to?
Oh,
Should
fuck
I be
no.
worried about swearing? Oh, okay.
Fuck no.
That's actually something off-putting about Spiritfarer, is that it does have a coarse language to it with some of the characters.
Oh, yeah.
So is it like meant to be conflicted with the visual? So it's like cutesy stuff, but then serious language, and then it's like a weird discrepancy?
Yeah, it does deal with some heavy themes. And there are a few calculated F-bombs.
What was the next game on your list?
So the next game I have is Songs of Conquest.
I've never heard of this.
This is a very recent release. I've had my eye on this for a while. As I talked in a previous podcast, I'm a huge fan of the Heroes of Might and Magic games. And this is, in pretty much every way, a spiritual successor. It's by a very small indie team, and they're effectively trying to modernize and quicken the pace of that style of game. So if you haven't listened to the previous podcast where I talked about this franchise, Heroes of Might and Magic, it has sort of three aspects. You have an overworld aspect where you explore with your various heroes, your generals, picking up resources and defeating monsters. Then you have a city building aspect where you make resource nodes and dwellings to recruit creatures into your army. And then you have the actual battles, which are turn-based tactics, using the creatures you've recruited. So what this does differently is it tries to streamline a lot of the heroes' gameplay. So one thing, I'm not going to try to get too technical because I know you two haven't really played it, and I don't want it to be like, well, it does this, which is different from this. Like a core thing I can say is those creature dwellings I mentioned before is in every hero's game, those dwellings replenish at the start of every in-game week, and every day in the game is a turn. So once it gets to the last day of the week, you try to make a beeline back to your castle so you can get a fresh, like, top off your army. In Songs of Conquest, creature dwellings replenish every day. So you can kind of just have a hero sit there recruiting new creatures each day and then go out with a doom stack and sort of wipe the map.
Did you end up liking this title?
I like it. I do like it. I appreciate what it's trying to do. The issue is right now they are selling this for $30 in early access. And I can't, no part of me thinks that it's a better deal than just getting like Heroes of Might and Magic 3 complete off GOG for $250 with an HD mod, or even getting like Heroes of Might and Magic 5 off of Steam for, I think that the complete edition of that goes for like maybe $10 on sale. Because right now both those versions have more depth and they have more content. Like, your typical Heroes game has, like, 10 factions. This game only has 4. And it has a campaign mode, but the campaign's really short and nothing of real note. And I feel that the efforts to streamline have removed a lot of the, I don't know, I guess the depth, but also I just don't see it having staying power. Like, I've played a few matches, even, like, one online, which I typically don't do for these games. And they just went by, like, I got them done in a day. I mean, which is odd to say for a Heroes game, because those games, a game of Heroes can go on for, like, multiple days, depending on how much you want to put into it. There's nothing about it that's really grabbed me. It has this great 2.5, like, pixel art style. It looks a lot like, Octopath Traveler. Like, that style of, like, HD pixels. And the character models are great. The soundtrack is great. For a game called Songs of Conquest, they really lean into that. Like, one of their ideas is that each faction has like a sort of musical unit that can buff your other units with a song, and that song actually loops into the combat music. So if you have two factions both doing that, it sort of plays like a remix of both themes. That's real cool.
Yeah.
What would the game need to do, do you think, to sort of drag you further in?
I think it needs some additional factions, because with 4 factions I've already like exhausted them. Like I've solved them, for lack of a better word. And that's something you don't really want in a Heroes game, because like Heroes 3, that game came out in the 90s, and there are still people finding like new strategies and like unit synergies and things.
The meta needs to evolve, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and
it's pretty stagnant.
That's exactly it. I don't feel a meta. The game is, with as streamlined as it is, it feels like it's strictly a numbers game. Like, I have more units, therefore I always win. Whereas with in past Heroes games, I have gotten by just like using like insane strategies, like kiting enemies around the field as I like my archers pick them off and things. Like winning by the skin of my teeth, and I just don't feel that here in Songs of Conquest, which I feel is a shame, because this game has been in development for a while. I'm very disappointed it launched in early access even with that development, and it was like fairly high profile, and I worry it's going to go away in like a month. So if you want to support like indie devs, yeah, go ahead. Maybe get it on sale. I think $30 is definitely too steep, but it might also be a good end to this franchise if you don't necessarily want to go into something as in-depth as like Heroes 3.
Yeah, yeah. Before I go on to my game, Pac-Man Museum Plus, I might edit this out. Do you guys want to talk about the state of play thing? I completely forgot about it until just now. Do you guys want to talk about it?
Oh, the PS,
like Resident
the
Evil, or
Sony
anything
thing.
like that?
Sure.
What'd y'all think of it?
It's a state of play. I mean, they don't make waves anymore. You need an E3 to make like big waves. I haven't been excited for like a game announcement since E3 died, and I don't know when the last one was like, ooh, yeah, I want to see more of that.
Do you not get excited by Nintendo Direct?
No, because like here's the thing with Nintendo. They make incredibly great games. They make such polished games, but I feel like I don't know. I feel like even with Splatoon and like Breath of the Wild, I feel like they're sort of just in their own world. I feel like it's like they're not quite in touch with what you can do with games, I feel.
I see that. They feel like they're in a vacuum. And even like Breath of the Wild. I like Breath of the Wild a lot. I think you're a little more sour on it, I believe. But like that being said, you can tell how much of it was like, it's so fascinating to dissect something like that, because like part of it is in a vacuum of like, wow, Nintendo doesn't learn a lot, but then Breath of the Wild's also like, oh, it learned a lot from very specific things, and in some ways it felt like chasing trends, and in some ways it felt like Nintendo was holding it back still. So it's really interesting to see that sort of stuff. And yeah, when it comes to other stuff, I think Nintendo, especially when we get into later titles, it gets more and more. I'm excited by certain developers, like the Strikers developers, but otherwise they feel like they're stagnating in aesthetic design and sometimes in gameplay too, where it feels less fresh. And I can see not being excited by a Nintendo Direct.
I also think specifically like you see this in Mario, where I feel like the craziness is sort of gone. The sort of chaotic things you could do with the gameplay, I feel like it's a bit too sort of it's a bit too play tested. The parameters are a bit too strict. So you look at a speedrun of Super Mario 64, compare that to a speedrun of Super Mario Odyssey, you're not like you won't even know what's going on in the 64 one because the strats they found are so insane. But like they make, it's not that they make bad games. It's just that they make really really well sculpted games that are very formulaic, very true to what they've already made, mostly.
Possibly over-polished is another way to say it, yeah.
Sure.
Like, what was the last...
But going back to Sony.
Yeah, back to Sony.
Yeah, Sony.
I think the issues with the state of plays compared to Nintendo Directs is Nintendo's been doing Directs much longer, so they know how to structure that sort of, like, just title reveals format, whereas with the state of plays it's a lot of soundtrack, then logo comes in and you're supposed to be excited for the logo. Nintendo can get away with
and
that.
You're wondering what it is like, is this a Dead Space game?
Yeah.
Is this
Nintendo can get away with that because they can plop up like Metroid 5 and that's exciting. But when like Sony plops up, I don't know, Dead Space 4 that's, I don't know, it doesn't carry the same gravitas to me.
Yeah,
sure.
It's also, I think Sony has kind of shot themselves in the foot too, because I don't think they have, the PlayStation fans are going to come out of the woodworks. I don't think they have that great franchises active at the moment. When I think of like the great old franchises like Ratchet today is not Ratchet what it used to be. It used to have like more teeth and stuff. Like Jak they haven't done anything with that. They don't have Crash Bandicoot, period. They don't own Spyro. Metal Gear Solid is like, that's a dead franchise, and that wasn't even a Sony franchise by the end. It's like, what do you got? Well, Horizon Zero Dawn. Okay, what else do you got? Last of Us. And like, there are people who love these games, definitely, but I feel those are way too, like, I don't like cinematic games in general, and when the entire Sony offering is just like God of War, whatever Naughty Dog makes, whatever they're doing over at Santa Monica and Sucker Punch, is like, this is exactly the things that I don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Pavlo said it really well, the original co-host. What he didn't like about Sony was how little it cared about legacy, and it's a really good example of how legacy can reward a developer or like a publisher with like, hey, we've got things to get excited about, even if it's like an IP or whatever. Like, bringing back medieval, even if it doesn't sell well, is still something to care about. They create a culture with, the Sony brand, and Sony just abandons it for the modern game of the time.
Yeah.
And that can be really depressing. Yeah.
I think Jim Ryan's leadership has been a disaster. I think he is the worst thing Sony, he's the worst leader PlayStation has ever had. I didn't love Sean Layden, but wow, he was so much better. I felt like he was kind of just I felt like he was a step back, but wow, he was so much better.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, when are we going to get Bloodborne PC? You're never going to get Bloodborne on PC. Why would Jim, Bloodborne sold, I believe, 2 million copies. They're not going to put that on PC. Spider-Man sold 30 million copies or something. That gets on PC.
Yeah. Yep.
Watch them announce Bloodborne PC just a week after you release
Summer of Games.
I am okay with jinxing it. If it's a good jinx, I'm okay with it. Let's but specific titles in the state of play. What were you guys interested in, or were you interested at all in anything?
The Resident Evil stuff for me, but yeah, Murph.
I was gonna say, it was one of those gameplay or video game announcements. I don't know how we phrase these things now, but that I had to rewatch it a few times to really feel hype about anything. Like that Street Fighter 6 trailer, I was kind of lukewarm on, and then I actually really paid attention. I'm like, wow, this game looks real pretty. The animations are cool, and the trailer's well edited. I think as far as that Resident Evil 4 remake, I don't know, it was hard for me to feel excited about that, and I think it's mainly in the way that the trailer was edited. It was just kind of yep, it's Resident Evil 4 remake. You knew this was coming, but there was nothing to really I don't know, go off of other than a new Ashley design.
Yeah, would you have preferred here's just 2 minutes of uninterrupted gameplay?
Yeah.
And you can then you can contrast this is the new direction compared to what the old game used to be. I agree. I think the trailer was really bad, but I'm really excited for the game.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that's been missing since E3 died is gameplay demos in these reveals, because they would have Sony would always have the long 5-minute gameplay demos showing off something, and they don't really fit that in anymore because they have to get it in a 30-minute video.
Do you remember when they ended on E3 on Days Gone?
I did.
They did it. Yeah, they did that once. They did a 2-minute little showcase of Days Gone earlier in the E3, and then they ended it on another showcase of Days Gone, and people were like, what the hell was this? And apparently that was supposed to be the reveal for Red Dead Redemption 2, but there had been some I think there had been some shooting or something recently, and Sean Layden, you saw how nervous he was on stage. I think he was trying to gauge the room. Do we show Red Dead Redemption or do we not? And I think it was it's not it's in bad taste to do it now.
Yeah.
And I disagree. I feel like people don't connect games to I don't know if this is something you want to put on the podcast. I don't think people connect the two anymore. Horrific, tragic happenings and stuff.
Oh, I mean, not to get too political. I agree with you. I don't think people connect those. I think people try to connect those to sort of put a bad blame on media influence, but I don't think media influence, if you literally just look at numbers, I don't think media influence actually tells people to commit violent acts. And
I think maybe because the what they showed from Days Gone was also really brutal. It was way more brutal than anything in Red Dead Redemption 2. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's just because it was Rockstar Studios, and Rockstar sort of got their name, they got their going, kind of etching people on and being deliberately pursuing controversy.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
I think it's just the timing. Humans are pattern-seeking animals. So, I don't know if that Red Dead, whatever they were going to show, was ever showed eventually. I think it's just one of those circumstances where it's a rough call either way.
Yeah, because it's just somebody over at Bloomberg writes PlayStation reveals Red Dead Redemption 2. Is this in bad taste? And then like investors who don't have any, like who don't care at all about video games read that, and it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. It goes into something beyond actual game enjoyment or appreciation. Yeah, it goes into weird speculations. I was going to say my take on Resident Evil 4 remake is there was just not enough shown. I am okay with a new tone. I don't need it to be particularly goofy, but I probably want more extended horror. I think I want this to be a contrast or a partner to Resident Evil Village. Resident Evil Village was much more like a newer Resident Evil 4 in terms of goofiness and action pace. So maybe if this is the sort of mirror to that, instead of them being very similar titles, I think I'll be happy.
I've gotten into like a bit of a disagreement with a lot of people on so many platforms about exactly this point about, like, it's not that it's not that I'm okay with Resident Evil 4 having a different tone. I am ecstatic that it has a different tone, because like I've said this on so many avenues before, but like Resident Evil 4 exists on a very specific lane of incredible, amazing, perfect action titles. Mm-hmm. If you're going to try to put a remake of Resident Evil 4 in that lane, it's probably going to be crushed. Yeah. But also, it's already perfect. You can't do Resident Evil 4 better. You're going to just do the same game but spiff up the graphics? That's not interesting. If you just take it and you go, no, you know what? We'll do this and we'll just take away all the goofiness and the silly action and do it actually kind of a hardcore horror game. I love that. Do it like, I said this, I don't remember where I said this, but like, fork Resident Evil 2 remake, where on one hand you get Resident Evil 3, and that's sort of an extension of the late game action game, which Resident Evil 2 remake was, and then make Resident Evil 4 be more of an extension of that sort of tracking around the police headquarters, that sort of horror game they had going on. I think that's way more interesting.
I'm not opposed at all to doing a different tone with a remake. My main concern is that it is one of those, like, we are remaking one of the, like, greatest blank of all time. Like, and I'm worried with remaking something like that they lean into sort of a self-aware writing about it.
You're talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake?
You know what? To a degree, yeah. I wasn't directly... I was going to say it makes me think of those live-action Disney remakes.
Yeah.
I'm just worried about, like, inevitable, like, fixes to plot holes or certain things that haven't aged well, and I'm just, like, bracing myself for the discourse about that, you know?
You're buckling yourself into... Because they already removed some of the Ashley scenes from VR, which I don't mind. I'm just saying, like, yeah things are going to happen.
I'm excited for when they do Resident Evil 5 and 6 remake, because that's like.
Do you think they
would
will?
You want
though?
a Resident Evil 5 taken seriously?
No, I've never played Resident Evil 5 or 6. I know, like, very, very little about either one of those games. I'm just interested in, like, here you have a do-over. You can take these games, which in hindsight people are not nearly as positive on as the games preceding it, and 7 and 8, which then came after. You can take these two games, which people are sort of mid on, and you can actually do something interesting with them. I'd love to see them try that.
Well, for that sentiment, I would agree with you, but for that sentiment, I would also 10 times agree more so with, like, a Code Veronica or a Resident Evil 0, which are also very limited in where they are right now, and they had so much potential in their creativity.
Remake Outbreak.
That's true.
Or Outbreaks, for instance. But that being said, I think they will go for 5 and 6, especially since 5 is one of the best-selling Capcom titles of all time. So they will just see that opportunity as well. So, you know, we'll see what happens as the time goes on.
You know what I love? If you go on the Nintendo eShop and you search, like, the re-releases of the Resident Evil games, Resident Evil 5 and 6... they're packaged together. Resident Evil 4 is not packaged with anything.
Yeah.
Because Resident Evil 4, that's a product in and of itself. 5 and 6, no. You buy those together because nobody is going to buy just one of those.
Especially like so long after the fact. Who's thinking now in 2022? Oh, I need to play Resident Evil 5 and 6. Other than Murph, I guess. Murph was the guy.
You were also there.
I'm also,
Yeah, I was. Unfortunately.
I'm also excited for Sony is leaning more and more into showcasing VR. I'm really excited for that.
I was surprised about
really
that,
hope...
honestly, that they said it was mostly going to be about VR2 titles.
Yeah. I'm really hopeful that they take VR seriously this gen, because I think that's such an interesting new paradigm to design games around.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've hit like the ceiling with graphical fidelity.
Yeah.
At least I hope we have hit the ceiling. Like, if they start talking about like Xbox 6 can go 8K, that's gonna wash over me like a cold wave. But if they're like, we're doing new gameplay things with different wacky ways of doing it, then yeah, I will be actually interested in that.
But
Totally.
do you think? I mean, there's the ongoing conversation of, is VR? Maybe it's just a cost thing where VR is still too costly for some. Do you think that it's still going to be a fad? Like, there's just going to be a time where it washes over and it's like, it's just not going to work. Stop trying to make fetch happen.
Yeah.
Or do you think that a dedicated push for it is really going to help the industry?
I feel like we saw a dedicated push a few years ago when like PSVR first came out and we had like the Kinect and everything. And then, people rated those E3s real low because it was based on games they couldn't buy because they needed additional peripherals to purchase. So I think it really just depends, like, what's the real breakout title for VR? That's not...
Probably Half-Life Alyx.
I guess, yeah.
I think it's
not including Sony. I'm just saying that is probably the VR title people would buy.
Yeah. And you know what?
Like if I had a VR headset, I'd get that.
Yeah, Valve did make it a power move, saying like, "Hey, you want Half-Life 2.8? You got to get the Valve Index for it."
Yeah, no, but then again, they're also not continuing to support it. It needs it doesn't need just one banger or blockbuster. It needs continual things, or else it will still be like any other platform that doesn't have enough support.
Yeah, it's like the Stadia.
Yeah.
Remember the Stadia?
Well,
Stadia has
failed.
jack shit.
Stadia failed for many reasons. Can we talk a bit about how Valve, I feel like it's such a just poorly run company. How can you have like, do you guys know who Doug Church is? I think his name is Doug Church. He's the lead director on the original System Shock. He works over at Valve. What's he doing there? He's not making games.
Does he just lead the storefront? I think there's a lot of people that just manage or coordinate the storefront or whatever.
Why aren't they making games? They have like so much money and they can't just oh hey, we'll just do a Portal. Oh hey, we'll do a Portal 2. Okay. See you 10 years from now. It's like, what is wrong with you guys? Keep making games.
Well, if you look at what they develop, it to me, it's clear personally that they're developing hardware. I think hardware is like the thing they're pushing for, and like that goes into the lesson of you need games to support it. And technically, I will say Steam does have like an ability to tap into other third parties or supports. I want to get a Steam Deck. I do. That shit looks great. But that being said, like, yeah, there's no game design anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's gotten to the point now where like, if they announce a Half-Life 3, I don't care. Like, I don't think anybody, I think that ship on like, oh my god, Half-Life 3 is finally happening. I think the ship has sailed. I think people have just sort of like, who's still excited for another Half-Life?
Yeah.
Well, that may have been the point of a Half-Life Alyx and a VR. Because, like, I agree. If they just released straight up, like, tomorrow, they shadow drop or magically have fanfare for a Half-Life 3 and it's just a normal PC game, that's not good enough. It has to be a VR title with some crazy new shit in it that's like, whoa! But that also, you can't just magically make that. That has to be dedicated. That has to be built, you know?
And then they did like Source 2. Did they release anything on the Source 2 engine?
I believe Alyx and that new Portal game is on Source 2, I believe.
Oof. It's ridiculous. Like, just, this is what I'm talking about. Like, I always talk about this. Do you guys remember the Justice League movie where, like, Henry Cavill, he can't shave his mustache and all that? Yeah. This is what happens when nobody is in charge of anything. Like, if there was a real director in charge of doing a Justice League movie, he would have just shaved Henry Cavill, and then they would have just paid a fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, but instead it's like, well, the lawyers say you can't do this. The lawyers, well, you know, the people over at marketing think this. Like, you just, it's kind of become an ugly word, or it's kind of like an ugly practice to assign so much praise to like a single individual like Kojima when they are surrounded by so many talented people, and they are. But you need somebody in charge. Somebody has to be there to make, like, executive decisions. Or else you just get a Valve where all the greatest talent in the industry gets sponged off to manage a storefront. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, a director may not necessarily be a complete auteur, but a director, for sure, no matter what, has the ability to maintain a consistency and have and make creative decisions as a whole body. Yeah.
A bad director is still better than like a committee.
Yeah, and I've heard that is kind of the issue with Valve, is that they basically do everything by committee. You need like majority support within the company to work on any sort of project, which is why a lot of like game projects haven't gotten off the ground. They don't have
because of the Scrum operating model they have going on, right?
Yeah. Whereas something like, well, okay, I don't want to give immediate praise to Ubisoft, but they do allow their teams to work on small projects if they don't have anything else going on. Yeah. And that's how we get experimental games like Grown Home and things.
That's a Ubisoft game?
Yeah, the little robot.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was made by a small team at Ubisoft that wasn't doing anything that day. So Valve doesn't have that. They're not putting out. I guess there was that Job Desk simulator they put out, but that was to demo the Steam Deck.
My final comment other than that was on Street Fighter, because I play Street Fighter. I'm not excited for it, but that being said, I think both 4 and 5 go on to show it's got like the Civilization syndrome where on launch it will probably not be super good, but with the continued support, I think it will shape up to be a great game. I personally like how 4 and 5 ended. But that being said, like, to me when I saw it, I didn't like the art style being so, like, it felt colorless at certain points and then the color stands out. So for many, they may like it. I just didn't like the fidelity, the high detail. It was a little too much for me. I don't mind things like that open world campaign thing. I think Capcom dedicating themselves to an actual story in any sense is a lesson they learned from 5 and the success of like a Mortal Kombat. Mm-hmm. Like story modes are in for fighting games because some people can't integrate themselves into a community and develop the necessary skills. They want to be able to have a solitary experience with the title.
Well, I think some people like me. I like fighting games for the characters. I'm not good at them, but I like the characters.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. No, yeah, seriously though. Yes. So, we'll see what happens. Are we done on the state of play?
Yeah.
I liked that the Dead Space game, but I feel like I need to see...
The Callisto Protocol?
Callisto Protocol. I like that. I like when games go John Carpenter, but I think I need to see more of it. I need to know if this is just, it's The Last of Us, but the Thing in space, right?
Yeah.
If it's just like this cutscene bloated monstrosity. Or if it turns out that it's like, well, it's a four-player co-op multiplayer game. Season one is dropping in a couple of weeks, guys.
Remember integrated apps?
Oh God, don't remind me. Remember they tried to do that for the Phantom Pain. It was like, you can use your cell phone as the iDroid. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Why would I do that?
My hands are on the controller.
Yeah.
Do you want me to play your game? Let me play your game, please. That's what I feel like half of the intrusive elements are, where it's like, hey, do this extra thing. And it's like, can I just play the game you gave me? Not adding more money to it, nothing. But
Bethesda must have made bank on that Pip-Boy smartphone holder thing.
Oh, possibly.
I know a friend that owns one of those that got like the collector's edition of 4. He's never used it because it's a hunk of plastic.
Yeah.
Why would you buy a collector's edition of 4? I'm just
because it came with the Pip-Boy.
Oh God! Oh, that's how they get you. Apparently,
It's not even
there's
it's
someone
not
to
even
buy
like a
it.
cheap metal. It's just plastic.
It's a very sturdy plastic. And you're supposed to snap your smartphone in there, but it came out in 2014, so it doesn't fit most modern smartphones.
Okay, well, moving on from that, I guess. Final thoughts? Anybody?
No?
We're good.
Do you want to talk about Pac-Man Museum or?
I want to talk about it enough to be able to just transition easily. I think what was interesting about this time around, number one, apparently the Xbox version is completely borked in terms of input delay. I saw that on Twitter.
No.
I played it on Game Pass on the PC. I didn't experience any input delay, but apparently on Xbox it's fucked, so don't play it on Xbox.
Okay.
I like Pac-Man, y'all. I fucking love Pac-Man. That's really all I gotta say. And it's interesting every time I play like collections like these to look at, because Pac-Man's one of those franchises that's like, where do you go after Pac-Man 1? Pac-Man 1 is pretty like, it's set in its ways,
Yeah.
and you could do something like a Miss Pac-Man where it's like slightly different mazes. But like looking at because they, number one, Museum Plus totally abandons Miss Pac-Man because it's not a normal Namco game. But like you look at like ones like Super Pac-Man or Pac-Man and Pal, and they're about specifically the items and gates. They sort of embrace the maze aspect where it's like, if you eat this item, it opens this part of the gate in this corner of the little screen. And to me, those are not fun, but definitely experimental and thoughtful. And I think the ones that really work are like Pac-Mania and Pac-Man. It's not Anniversary. It's the
Championship Edition.
Well, number one, Championship Edition is like that. And is the best Pac-Man game in my opinion.
Yes.
It's not Anniversary. It's
Other than World 2.
Arrangement. It's Pac-Man Arrangement. That's it. Arrangement. Also, sort of like it's not necessarily a full-on fine-tune, but it's just a stylized take with specific power-ups or whatever that sort of flavor the experience. Championship Edition's just really fun because it makes a new gameplay loop for Pac-Man. Where it turns into a sort of speedrun efficiency thing, where it's like, oh, I gotta find the perfect route to do this, and it just gets so satisfying when you get it right. And those sort of deliberations and refinements are just super welcome. I love Pac-Man. It's great. Wow. Does
this collection have like any goodies, like posters or manuals?
Specifically, what this collection does is it sort of gives you like a hub room where you can decorate your arcade with different statues. It's got like a little like a slot machine for you to get little 3D models to enjoy, and you can decorate however you see fit. And they do have like a history section where you can look at the history. It gives you CRT filters, and it gives you little border windows with nice concept art, but I don't believe they give you like I don't think they have manuals. A lot of these games are arcade games, Murph. But that being said, yeah, they give you like a little bit. They don't give you a full-on background history like some other collections do. No.
Okay, I see.
Do you think you can buy like a cell phone periphery thing where it's like it turns your cell phone is like a little bit of the screen becomes like a monitor, and the rest is just like this arcade machine, and you can play a little Pac-Man in that?
They may try. Don't tempt them, all right? Please.
I feel like that does exist. I feel like I've seen that.
Dang. I want to have like... I'm still looking for like $1 million idea. I feel like once I get one of those, I'll be set. But every time I come up with something, it's always like, nope, it already exists. I talked about this once.
Don't bother coming up with anything new. Come up with something old, and then just SEO, search engine optimize your way to the top. That's all you got to do.
I once came up with it was like an invention competition at school. It was a real thing where it's like kids come together, like show some of your ideas, and it's like a fun little competition. One of my ideas was like a flying drone that was also a vacuum cleaner.
Oh.
But it ended up just being like a gigantic R2-D2 that just sucks up garbage. It's like, well, I made a worse vacuum cleaner. Damn. Another one was like You know when you're on crutches, when you like injure your leg, you can put like a mop at the end of the crutches, and then you can clean the floors while you're hobbling around.
My take on this is that the American school system is just really, really bad.
No, I had an invention.
We didn't have anything like that.
My school did the invention thing.
I never did. Look, I'm in the American South, so look. Yeah,
I came up with a football and football gloves that had magnets in them, so it was easier to catch.
Oh no, the magnets are gonna hit somebody. You're gonna hurt
People
someone.
do that with Velcro, Murph. Velcro beats that.
Yeah, but I had a lot of magnets on hand.
That's fair. All right. Okay.
I feel like Captain America could use that football because he has the magnet to get the shield back.
Oh, and then he'd be
He
like
would,
Double
throw the
America,
ball.
Captain American football.
Yeah, Captain American football.
That would be good on frisbees. Yeah, no, you should retool that for frisbees. Yes.
Magnetic frisbee.
All right. I think the frisbee talk makes me think that it is time for the variety.
You know what
minute,
frisbee rhymes with? Cities. Well, we should say the variety minute this week is iconic cities in video games. Given that our game of the week is in, I would argue, one of the most iconic cities of video games.
Probably, yeah. Rapture's probably the big one in terms of like at least creativity and like coming up with a new one. I was going to say a lot of cities really matter in sandbox open games like Grand Theft Autos and all that.
Yeah, I was
like,
gonna say Vice City.
Yes, yeah. Setting determines so much of the tone of those games, but also they're most of the time based on real locations. So something like Rapture being so creatively like, no, this is its own system, then I think that's super cool too.
Yeah. Well, bro, I'm gonna give you like a good 5 minutes to get all your like FromSoft cities out of the way. You know, your Cassian and Orlandos, your Yarnums.
Yarnum's pretty cool.
Your Berg of the Boreal Valley.
Shut up.
Do you not feel that there are iconic cities? Do you not feel that there's lots of iconic cities in From games?
There are, but I was just going to generalize and say, because like I was also going to include like fucking Tomb Raiders and Uncharted, talking about ruins of cities where you sort of go back. What I like about FromSoft games is when you go back, it's sort of like an archaeological thing where you look at what happened to the city. And you get fragments and glimpses of it like actual history, and that sort of informs it. I don't have my favorite city in FromSoft is Shulva of the Sanctum City. I love Shulva as an area. It is like it is what I want in level design, at least for the Dark Souls games.
Did you ever play Kingsfield 4?
I did not yet. I'm going to record that eventually. I played the other 3 Kingsfields.
Okay. I think you'll like Kingsfield 4 then.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Any other cities?
I was making a list of like cities I personally remember very fondly. Places like Windfall Island in Wind Waker, Traverse Town in Kingdom Hearts, Whiterun in Skyrim, and then I realized that these are all like the first place you go to in these games. And do you find that's true for you? Like in open world games, like RPGs and such, like the first city is like the most fleshed out and memorable.
Well, it's the Firelink Shrine dilemma, where it's not necessarily the most fleshed out city, but because the game naturally, or like city or area, it's not the most fleshed out one, but because the game keeps funneling you back to that area, you just sort of, you just get more time with it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's also comfortable. It's that comfortable home experience where when you go through the gauntlet of something and it's tough and whatever, and you come back, now you have the moment of reprieve that sort of is that deliberate pacing. Since you said that, I just remembered Majula. Majula would be my favorite in that context, where Majula is just fucking sick.
is Majula a great little city?
It's not a
or
great
is it
city.
just-
No, it's kind of shitty.
Or is it just that song?
No, I like all of it because I personally like. I'm a big Dark Souls 2 simp. I like the NPCs within it, and I like that sort of living, breathing thing. I would not want to live there. And but I like the visual of it, the setting sun. It's sort of a beautiful solace, but is also slightly ominous in the context of knowing what Dark Souls is. So it's like,
by
the
the
setting
ocean.
sun is a bad thing too. You know what I mean? And it's just like shit like that where it's just
The manor. I love the manor.
yes, exactly. I love it all.
I think a city can be a shithole and still be iconic. Like City 17.
Like Bioshock.
Yeah, like Bioshock. City 17 is a really good one. Yes.
Yeah, and the thing they do with City 17 is they use an entire city to give you an impression of the state of the world.
Yeah.
You know. You see, I put down Isle Delfino. Does that count?
Yeah, that counts. I'd count that. Sure.
Sure.
Okay.
Did
I think
either
that
one
is
of
the
you-
best part of Super Mario Sunshine.
I'll agree with that.
Yeah, I don't like Super Mario Sunshine a lot. I think the strongest thing Super Mario Sunshine does is its aesthetic and setting. That's probably
no. I will cop to that. What about going back to the last retrospective I did on? What about Raccoon City? Does that feel iconic to you, or is it merely just reinforced in the franchise?
I think it's iconic. It's good. Yes, that people associate Raccoon City. It's like one of the biggest names in video games. I think so. Yeah.
Sure. But I'm also in like the place of name 5 places in Raccoon City. Like you have the
Murph
police
can.
headquarters.
The zoo, the subways.
Zoo? Yeah, the subways. That's in every city.
The Oswald Spencer Hospital.
There we go. You're pulling it. There we go. Let's come on, Murph.
The thing about
Did you know that in the remake, Carlos's chest pouches had jiggle physics?
I didn't know that. I didn't notice that.
That's
maybe,
the real jiggle.
maybe I
want.
need to download one of those shirtless Carlos mods.
It's very. There's a scene where I think it's one of the scenes where like he leaves Jill in the care of that other guy whose name I don't remember.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I gotta go or whatever. And like he does a little hop, and you can see the chest pouches. They like jiggle. It's very obvious in that one if you want to find it.
Huh, okay.
But 3 and Outbreak really, I think, are what would make that for me. 3 and Outbreak are like, okay, this is like, we're trying to integrate the city into everything. I think after that, when we talk about Resident Evil locations, they can be good for a nice cultural thing. Like the village in Resident Evil Village is a good village, but I don't necessarily think they are like completely like fleshed out. Maybe villages, I guess. We'll see what happens in the time.
Yeah. Or, like, I don't know. I think just the thing with the Resident Evil is that there's not a lot of competition for Raccoon City. Yeah. Do you remember Tall Oaks, Brogan?
Where was that?
That was the first area of Resident Evil 6.
I don't remember that. No, I'm sorry.
And there's the problem.
You go too many places in Resident Evil 6. You go like globe hopping to where it's like you're not fixed in a singular setting. And I think that's like one of those issues where it's like the intrigue, the spy, espionage, intrigue, and action have a conflict with horror. Because horror is usually like a very fixed setting.
Yeah.
You stay in one location so you can develop that location, you know?
Yeah, well,
Does
I think...
6 still do resource management?
I think...
Well, I'm wondering because, like, how do you do resource management in, like, if you're traveling across the globe?
Well, I mean, it's broken up into levels. It's not like a connected, seamless thing. So it's more about, like, managing your resources between levels.
Where are we on Silent Hill? Is that a city or is that a town? I feel like that's a town.
Silent Hill's a vibe.
I count towns. I think at this point we're counting towns as cities.
Okay.
I think that's what's happening.
Municipal areas. Well, it's like, it depends on how much they add into it. Like, you know, in the very first Resident Evil game, they say Raccoon City has like a population of 60,000 or something. And then like every subsequent entry within Raccoon City adds in all of these like things. Like it has a zoo. It has a massive ass zoo in the middle of town. It has a central park, you know.
I
The
feel like
number scale is what you're saying.
Yeah.
I feel like if we can count Majula, we can count Silent Hill.
Yeah. the towns have been entered in. We're doing it. Silent Hill is really good about it too. I think Silent Hill is for me personally, the best aspect of the franchise in terms of like learning more about its history informs the game itself in so many ways beyond just like, I think 2 does a really good job with it, but I think a lot of people, when they get hung up on the franchise, get focused on the psychological solitary aspect of Silent Hill. Whereas like when you really get into Silent Hill, there's a lot of appreciation for like the cult history or the tourism aspects, and you sort of just learn those different things and how they inform the game as you play it. That's really good.
Does Casinopolis from Sonic count? Well, I guess it depends. Is Casinopolis like an actual city? Is it an opolis, or is it just a casino?
Murph, I think you're thinking...
Is the Strip in New Vegas, is that like a city, or is that a casino?
I think that...
I think that's as close to a city as you could get.
Yeah, it is the New Vegas.
Oh yeah, that's right. What am I saying? I sound like an idiot.
Well, it also has districts like Freeside and like that sewer section where other people live.
Yeah.
So it like maintains that Vegas identity.
And I think that's like kind of core to what makes a city feel iconic is like whether or not it's just an area or it's like multiple areas, you know?
Yes.
Oh.
That's a good point, Murph. Oh, there you go.
You know, whether or not it actually feels like a city or whether it's just an urban level.
I love Haven City from Jak 2 and 3. Did either of you ever play that?
Shit, yeah.
Yes, I like Haven City.
It's like a Big Brother, but in a kid-friendly GTA.
Yeah, and I think that what makes it so interesting is like it directly contrasts the game that came before it.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and like it's so interesting to see how Naughty Dog like changed how like its directions every time as it was trying to, I don't know if the word is match or whatever, but I just loved Jak 1. Jak 1 is like my favorite out of that trilogy because it just feels like Banjo-Kazooie but fucking 10 times better. That's how I feel about it. So then when we go into Jak 2 and 3, they're very interesting in how they I like being able to traverse the city in so many ways, like the hoverboard. Being able to pull out the hoverboard at any point in Haven City is super cool. Or like just being able to jack the vehicles. I love all of that, and I love it how different of an approach it is to Jak 1. Yeah.
I love also that even though Jak 2 and 3, they're not really platformers anymore, they still have that platforming mechanic. Like the control setup is the same. It's like, oh, it's just like, what is this? It's a Grand Theft Auto game with the most insane movement scheme you've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, without it, that would be the moment where it's like, is this really a Jak game? But maintaining that core fundamental gameplay, or like that movement system at least, that's how it's like, okay, yeah, we've carried over. There's continuity still. That's how you feel the continuity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Jak 2 with Haven City does that district thing where you kind of always know what part of the city you're in based on like the color scheme and what sort of buildings you're seeing. Like the harbor area is very different from like the farm area where you go into like the jungle ruins and stuff.
I love that depressing farm area.
Running over the giant pumpkins.
Yeah, but it's also like just, it's such a depressing, like authoritarian tucked in between like, what is that, Chinatown?
Yeah.
And, and like the slums where crew and the gang hang out. It's like, this sucks.
Yeah.
Yep. I don't necessarily find, I don't 3 is the one I've played the least. But what is the desert city of that one called?
Spargus.
Spargus. My bad. What I enjoyed more was the Mad Max when you go out into the wasteland with your little dune buggy or whatever. I enjoyed that part of that edition more than the actual Spargus.
If only there were things to do out there.
Yes.
Yeah. And then they did the Lost Frontier or whatever, and apparently it's not that great because they dumbed down the movement scheme.
No, and they introduced Dark Daxter.
Dark Daxter. Oh,
yeah.
He's already fueled with Dark Eco. What is... whatever. Whatever.
No, but he gets overcharged and he becomes like a werehog.
That's a werehog.
Yeah, like Sonic.
Yeah, from Sonic Unleashed, the werehog. Everyone knows the werehog.
I was gonna say, like, Why is that the reference? Why not like?
Because he's like big and purple.
Why doesn't he become like Dark Jack?
I will say, I guess RPGs do a really good job with cities as well, but we can take that in for another time. We can sort of explore the RPGs, because RPGs will have the metropolises where you get to talk to the people. Talking to NPCs, in my opinion, is an important aspect of city life and those experiences.
Yeah.
But we don't have to talk about them.
Okay.
Fuck them.
Move on to our main segment.
Okay, all right. Everybody, our game of the week is Bioshock 2. Just briefly, Bioshock 1 was a 2007 title developed by Irrational Games and 2K Boston. I think they're like the same. I don't know like the dev details on this, but it was directed by Ken Levine. Is it Levine or Levine?
Levine, I believe.
Levine. It was a first-person shooter with superpowers, largely derived and considered to be a spiritual successor to the immersive.
Do you know about Adam Levine?
Isn't that the fucking Maroon 5 guy?
I think Levine knows about Adam. He came up with the concept.
Yeah, well, they're brothers.
What?
What? No. What?
No, they're not.
You threw me for a loop, man. I believed it. I literally believed it. I was like, I'm not going to look that up. He wouldn't lie to me like that.
The podcast has been derailed.
I'm sorry.
It's all good. You got me good.
Developed by Irrational Games.
Yeah, there we go. Considered to be a spiritual successor to the immersive sim genre classic series System Shock. Many developers of Looking Glass Studios remained on this project and on the team. Through design, I would say it is a more streamlined console experience, which is what I think defines Bioshock in design.
Totally.
And the setting was about an industrialist named Andrew Ryan who built a city underwater, and the game itself scrutinized the ideology of objectivism to great effect. That was my summary on Bioshock 1. All right, Bioshock 2. 2010 title, developed by 2K Marin, with some returning developers from Irrational Games. Jordan Thomas was director on this one. This game removed itself from the direct conflicts presented in Bioshock 1 and sought to expand the world and put it further in time. You play as Subject Delta, the first ever Big Daddy to ever successfully pair with a little sister. You awaken a decade later, seeking to find your lost little sister, Eleanor Lamb. All while combating or fighting her mother Sophia Lamb's cult and the collectivist ideology, which has found horrific possibilities in Rapture's ruins. Gentlemen, what were your first thoughts on Bioshock 2?
My first thoughts, like the very first time I played this, I think I got this pretty close to launch. I loved Bioshock 2 from almost like the first moments. That Bioshock 2 is my favorite of the trilogy, if it really can even be called a trilogy. To me, Infinite's like this weird spin-off that just like references. I love being a big papa. I think this game has some of the best gunplay I've ever felt in a first-person shooter. Harkening back to our Half-Life. Oh yeah.
Sorry, did you play it on console or PC?
PC.
It plays really well on console, like the control setup.
I can imagine that. Almost, yeah, certainly. Harkening back to the Half-Life episode we did, I said that my litmus test for an FPS is whether or not the machine gun weapon is useful. I think that Bioshock 2 has an incredibly useful machine gun. So
Totally.
ergo, it is a good FPS.
What did you think about the spear gun?
The spear gun's great.
I love the spear gun.
You know what's...
Because you destroy them, all the enemies, and you just pick up your shots again.
You know what's better than a crossbow? A spear gun.
A spear gun.
Yeah. No, what I like is like those weapons, every single one is like a normal FPS standard human one supercharged into feeling like a big daddy. Like the melee weapon, the drill is like a dedicated melee weapon that you would continue to use. A lot of times you just fucking give up on the melee weapon. Fuck the melee weapon. But this one, it's like, no, you can use it. There's plenty of applications for it.
Yeah, there's even there's that plasmid, no, not plasmid, there's that gene tonic, which just makes you drop all your guns, and you can just use the drill. And
Yes.
the game is actually, I would argue, stronger if you do that. I think that's a better way of playing the game.
No, that was buck wild, because while I was playing this, I was getting I was looking up like original trailers for Bioshock 2, so naturally YouTube started spitting Bioshock 2 videos at me, and one of them put on only a few weeks ago was titled "Can you beat Bioshock 2 with just the drill?" And I was like, of course you can. This isn't like, can you beat Elden Ring only walking backwards? It's like, no, the game incentivizes
You can't even
to
walk
use the
backwards
drill.
in Elden Ring.
Well, yes, correct.
Well,
So the answer is no.
what I mean, the thing for me personally about what was so nice about the gameplay, I played Bioshock 1 in prep for this as well. The two things I noticed was it's the speed, it's the pace.
Oh god, yes.
The animations in 2 are so much faster and crisp. So like if I need to reload or switch things, it's just like so fast.
Especially
whereas in
switching
Bioshock
ammo.
1, yes,
Yeah.
in Bioshock 1, it's like a whole ordeal. And don't even get me started on hacking. Hacking broke up the pace of a fight in Bioshock 1 so much, it was annoying. But it was also, I felt, essential to hack in Bioshock 1.
Yes.
Whereas in Bioshock 2, it's a very passive experience where it's like, it still allows the pace of the gameplay to never be interrupted. And it just feels really nice doing that.
Yeah, Bioshock 1 kind of suffered because it's a transitionary piece between like the more straightforward immersive sim horror of System Shock 2 and like a more action focused game, which is what Bioshock 2 is. Bioshock 2, I don't think it has like the horror heights of Bioshock 1. There are really powerful moments in Bioshock 1, but Bioshock 2 kind of drops that sort of slow ambient pace to things, and it just doubles down on the action, and I think that was the right call for a sequel.
Yeah.
Well, also what it did was like, it made it more expressive and cartoony. The art design is much more like focused on expressions and expressiveness. And like they even cut content from the original Bioshock that sort of emphasizes or leans in that. It brings back the Rumbler. Which was a cut content enemy from Bioshock 1. It's just a lot more enemy types that are very visible, and like as soon as you see them, you know what they do, and they do things unique and differently that's really nice. It's kind of hard to see in Bioshock 1, the unique NPCs. The unique NPCs of Bioshock 1, when you fight them, are very like, it's sort of hard to grasp at first, and then it's like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like going back to hacking, in 2, hacking feels like an option, whereas in 1 it feels like a necessity, because you have so fewer options within 1 itself. When I think about 1's level design, I think of a lot of low ceilings and cramped hallways, which I suppose works for the horror aesthetic, but it's not paced like a horror game. The shootouts in Bioshock 1 are very frantic, and you don't have a lot of room to maneuver. Whereas in 2, you have like wide open areas. Like that Pauper's Drop, there's segments where you're going along rooftops, which is weird to say for a Bioshock game.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you're escorting the little sisters while they're collecting Adam, you're just like, okay, before you put her down, you're going to have a bit of time now. Just set up the traps in the area that you want to have and position yourself to be able to deal with the enemies.
Yeah, I feel
And I was
like
yep.
I feel like gaming has really come around on the little sister defenses. I remember when the game first came out, there were people that's like when the height of like being mad at escort missions in games was. But now, every time I replay 2, I love the little sister defenses more because it gets you to engage with the level design. Like
who doesn't? it's such a well realized system that you could just drop a little tower defense game in the middle of it.
Yeah, and all the creative
Yes,
ways you can use the trap rivets, those are great.
Yeah, and like Bioshock 1, like playing Bioshock 1 this time made me like the ending more, but the thing that still stuck in my craw about Bioshock 1's ending was the Big Daddy Little Sister segment.
Oh yeah.
That's where I think the escort is like starts to fail, because like it's you're going by the pace of the machine, the AI or whatever, and then like it feels too stiff and it doesn't immerse yourself into the Big Daddy persona and the relationship. Whereas the relationship here is really informed. You get an actual incentive and benefit to get these bodies and mine them instead of it just being a normal obstacle, and it's just a way better thing to feel. It just works better for the relationship.
Yeah, and it gets you to explore the level more. Like, I imagine if you ignore doing any of the little sister stuff and just beeline the objective, you could probably beat this game like in 3 hours.
Wow.
Wow.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I skipped. I actually, by the end of it, I did skip a lot of the, just because I wanted to finish it in time. I just wanted to be sure I had things. I didn't skip the Little Sisters. I would skip the atom collecting sometimes.
Oh.
And I ended up feeling it at the end. But this goes into one of my complaints with the game. I think the ending to Bioshock 2, after you get the Eleanor Lamb plasmid, where you could just summon her, the combat becomes very trivial. And I was like, but Brogan, you can not use the plasmid. It's like, but why wouldn't I use it?
To me,
you know what I mean?
To me, that's like the end of Half-Life 2, where they give you the super gravity gun. You know, it's just like, go to town. This is now like the power payoff.
But you say that, but like to me, there's still like an extended portion. That prison segment, you have the entirety of Eleanor Lamb there, and that is longer than the City 17 Citadel portion where you are supercharged.
Sure,
to me,
that
like
prison,
that victory lap needs to be crisp and fast.
Yeah, Persephone Prison does go on longer than I remember it. Like I always forget having to go back and like either harvest or kill the Little Sisters. Or harvest or save, I should say.
What was your favorite area in this one?
In 2, I love Ryan's Amusements. I love fucked up Disneyland. Because it just really shows, I don't know, the hypocrisy of Ryan himself. How he is totally fine with indoctrinating children and basically acting as the censor he is so afraid of.
Yeah. Yep.
I disagree on that one. I really don't like, because I like the idea of Bioshock 1 being like, he just follows his ideology and he's just true to it and things go to crap, rather than, well, he's just this, kind of two-faced hypocrite who like, but even in like Bioshock 1, like he starts using pheromones to control people, so like, yeah.
I was going to say, all right, we're going to get into philosophy now. I think the secret problem with Ryan's philosophy is it makes you a hypocrite, because self-interest is not necessarily something that is idealed or idealized. If you are idealizing self-interest is not adherent to that. Does that make sense? So like the biggest problems would be someone like Fontaine, who doesn't care about things like honor. It would be stealing. Stealing is something in your self-interest. Fucking do it. Why not? And if you're willing to do it, you will be better than the people who don't.
Well, see, that's the thing. This is like I've read, like, this is a little secret about me, and nobody is allowed to click the video. Nobody's allowed to leave just because I'm gonna say this, because I'm gonna talk a bit more about this. I have read an incredible amount of essays and the stories by Ayn Rand, because I was gonna do like a whole video about like the working title was Bioshock versus Objectivism, because Objectivism, as it is presented by Bioshock, is a very different ideology from Objectivism as presented by Ayn Rand. So, like, specifically the idea of like self-interest and like stealing. If you read, I think it's in like The Virtue of Selfishness or something, where Rand makes this point of that is not actually in your self-interest. Like becoming a pariah, becoming somebody of low social character, that's not in your self-interest. And when you begin to read more and more sort of into what he's saying, the word selfishness you almost like it feels like the wrong word for the ideology. It should be more like self-love, right? It's not the virtue of because selfishness has this connotation of screwing other people over, whereas the idea really just is, you have a right to your own happiness, and nobody has a greater claim on your life than that. And that's not what Bioshock is really about.
That's nice on paper, right? And I guess to bring it back to the games itself, it's not like Fontaine has a bad image technically. He does by the end of it, or by the end of events, but Fontaine has an orphanage and he has soup kitchens, and especially as Atlas, he sort of is able to control his own PR. That point you made about you want to not be a pariah and you want to be a good force in your community or else, that doesn't matter. It doesn't, because if you control these avenues and if you act in the illest of faiths, you can control those social forces. If you are the bad actor in a community of good actors or whatever, you control that stuff. So, that's that. I think Bioshock 1, even if it doesn't necessarily reflect Ayn Rand's values in those ways, I think still shows a practical application of why someone, especially like Andrew Ryan, why this system would fail. Why that, you know what I mean?
I see, again, I don't quite, I feel like, what I think the biggest problem with Bioshock 1 is that Andrew Ryan, he surrounds himself by people who are completely antithetical to his beliefs.
Yes,
so, like,
I would agree with that. McDonough especially was like super telling for me, like, because he hires McDonough because McDonough says, I don't care about profit. No thing I'm going to make is ever going to leak. That is what got him the job. And that is like just complete, you know what I mean?
No, well, see, that would probably be very much about, like, that's very in harmony with the sort of production as the highest achievement of man, which Rand wrote about. I'm more talking about like Steinman or Sander Cohen, these guys who just create works without any sense of aesthetics or anything like that.
I disagree with that. Like, I think this goes, because number one, this is more complicated because it's an art thing, right? Because with art,
you can make the game say anything you want it to say, really.
No. What I mean by that is like the art of Steinman and Sander Cohen. To them, they are pursuing art. And what does Picasso do when Picasso is done painting perfect pictures? Picasso gets bored. Picasso starts experimenting. And that's the idea there, is like that self-expression, unregulated, unchecked or whatever, leads to things like that, where that self-love goes into indulgences. Those indulgences may not, and I'm not criticizing the Ayn Rand ideology if she is anti those sorts of indulgences, but I think those are still natural within the story and within everything.
See, that this goes to, there's a chapter in The Fountainhead where you have like these art critics that also, the main villain of The Fountainhead is an art critic, and he gathers together a bunch of sort of subversive artists. Like, here's a man who wrote a book without using the letter E. Why did he do that? Well, just to like, he's mocking the parameters by which we look at, and then there's like, oh, here's a guy who's a playwright, and he specializes in writing bad plays. And it's just this sort of idea of art without any sort of standard. And she criticizes that. So I think, like, I feel like Bioshock, as like a criticism of objectivism, probably would have hit harder if Ryan had been less of a hypocrite, and if he had been more the central villain in every area. Because I feel like most of the other characters, they don't really reflect that.
That's fair. Murph, do you have anything to say?
I think it is very telling that we are talking more about the philosophy of Bioshock 1 than 2. Because Bioshock 2 doesn't really have a philosophy. It doesn't... No. At the very least, you could say Bioshock 1 is built on the writings of Ayn Rand. Whereas it's very hard to tell what Sophia Lamb is.
Yeah.
A
well,
deconstruction.
It's unfocused.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Bioshock 1, that's like individualism to the extreme. And Bioshock 2 is like collectivism to the extreme, but it kind of isn't, because it's
No.
just like this sort of cult of personality where it's like there's a character in the game called Sinclair, and I'm like, oh, that's Upton Sinclair, the socialist writer.
Yeah.
And but like, you'd think that he'd be the villain, like how because if you're flipping the dynamic of individualism and objectivism, you'd think like he'd be the bad guy, but he just isn't. He tries to help you as much as he can, but then
He's
his
also a
mind gets
huckster.
taken over.
Yeah.
And it's like, why isn't the villain just some fire-breathing communist to contrast from the first game?
Well, I mean, okay, so like, here's the thing: is like, at the end of the day, there's not enough Marxist if it's a communism critique. There's not enough text for the Marxism stuff. I was wondering as I was playing this where the meat of like the themes and the plot go, and for me, I finally grasped onto it in the Persephone prison segment, and it's not philosophy related, but it's more so tied to that individualism. Whereas like in Bioshock 1, I'm trying to articulate this off the top of my head. In Bioshock 1, you thought you were free, you thought your choices mattered, but by the end of it, it showed how you were still a victim to systems and outside influences, and how little choice you actually probably have in terms of your individualism. And 2 sort of emphasizes that sort of little silver lining in it, where there is a audio recording in Persephone where there is another person becoming a big daddy, and he's actually talking about Delta, and he sort of characterizes Delta in a way that made complete sense for everything, where he was like, he's being brainwashed right now, but Delta is fighting back every step of the way. And I wish I could be so willful as I don't remember the exact word. I wish I could be so willful as Delta. And then like right before that, Eleanor was like, our chemicals may tell us we love each other, but we love each other because we choose to love each other. And that sort of artifice of like, does the choice matter? The choice matters because you choose it, not because it matters. And that to me like made much more sense in that personal journey and relationship than any sort of political or philosophical bent to it.
Yeah.
I think in the protagonists you have a really sort of, I think that's really well executed. Where like in game 1, slave, you don't have choice. In game 2, slave, kind of, but your choices, they kind of do matter, because you can choose to like, you can forgive what's her name?
Gracie.
Fitzgerald? Yeah. You can forgive her. You can choose whether or not to execute Alexander, right? You can even choose the fate of Sophia Lamb. You can kill her or you can let her drown.
Yeah. Well, it's the thing where what I really like that Bioshock 2 does with moral choices is that it's not about, you're not deciding the fate of the world. I guess in a way you are, but that's not how they're framed. How they're framed is, what's the impression that you are leaving on Eleanor? Because she is, your quote-unquote child, and she has, like, no social understanding, in a way. If you really look at it, like, her entire childhood was taken from her. So this is, like, watching you do what you do as Delta, that's, like, how she informs the world. So are you going to teach her good values of, like, forgiveness and not preying on the innocents, or are you going to teach her that, you need to take every bit you can because the world is cruel and people are going to backstab you? And
I think that,
and you get 6 different endings depending on how you treat the little sisters and how you treat the 3 NPCs you can decide the fate of. And that really, I don't know, I just really like that sort of payoff. This is the very first time in a Bioshock game I've ever harvested a little sister, and I did it by accident and felt terrible.
Oof.
I clicked the wrong button. I meant to pick her up. Instead, I picked up her organs. So I decided to go through with that and get the sad ending, which is not necessarily the bad ending. It's just the ending where Eleanor's alone. And the change in dialogue that I got made me feel terrible for that accident, because Eleanor's suddenly talking about, like, you need to, like, it's survival of the fittest and stuff. And that, just the different change really got to me. The different change in dialogue in Persephone, especially like when you summon her in, she's much more brutal to the splicers.
One criticism I will have about this is that the moral choices are very obvious. When games do like branching narratives, I like it like Silent Hill 2 did, where it is completely hidden, and unless you're explicitly told that there are more than one endings, you probably wouldn't pick it up. Right? Where like, are you gonna save this character or not? You can just have it be way less understated. Just have like, you come into the room and you can choose to go, I don't know how you changed the game to sort of hide that you are making moral choices, but I really would have liked that more. I think it would have, for having the ending be sort of, like the reveal of your choices mattering is always more interesting to me, I think.
And that's hard to do because Bioshock is like, I think, focused on choices. Especially these first two, like that's part of the marketing. That's part of its whole body is like, oh, choices matter, or do they ?
Well, I think in this, it's sort of playful with it, because if you look strictly at the text of the game, there's like not a lot of evidence that Delta is like cognizant, you know? Like, he just comes back, but we're not really given an impression that he is suddenly like not been freed of like Big Daddy brainwashing. So in those moral choices where you choose to spare NPCs, that's like you fighting back and
proving your humanity.
Yeah, reclaiming humanity. And now your version of Delta is like a little different.
I'm gonna complain about something really quick. I sort of vibe with Aesir on this choice thing, specifically with the characterizations. Like the first one, what's her name again?
Grace Holloway?
Grace Holloway is the name. Okay. Grace Holloway is like very obviously like good person, bad circumstance, understandable why she's mad at you, but mean to you. And then if you look at it in terms of benefit to reward or whatever, she actively rewards you for saving her. There's no reward if you kill her other than whatever you loot. I never kill her. It seems obvious, the choice. And then I actively dislike the Dionysus Park segment because it is just the little sister stuff. I prefer the little sister stuff to be a supplemental thing to interact with and engage in the area rather than the thing you're collecting. And then like the plot line with the journalist doesn't really pay off for me personally.
Stanley Poole, yeah.
And then the Gil Alexander stuff, I get the impression, this is so weird, especially with how it's framed in terms of like saving Gil Alexander's the good choice. I think that framing and then the framing of how he talks to you makes me think he's not crazy. He's just guilty.
Yeah. Well, the Gil Alexander one is like, I always kill him.
I always save him.
Well, like the odd thing is it feels like it's from that time where like the good choice in video games is always preserving life. Whereas in this, like, you know, his past self is actively begging you to stop him because he's become this weird salamander tyrant with
it's interesting that we talked just now about the humanity within the Big Daddy. Because that choice, like, I'm like tripling down on this Gil Alexander's not crazy take, because in the dream segment where you play as a little sister and you walk around and you see the different visualizations, you see visualizations of Subject Delta dealing with the choices he's made to the different characters, and the one for when you save. Or when you let Gil Alexander live is you're taking out a human outside of a monster. And to me, that is exactly your same sentiment of bestowing or like being able to bestow mercy saves your humanity. Bestowing mercy or not killing Gil Alexander brings back that humanity in him where it's like, no, you have to live with your choices. You have to live with the guilt you've done. And you are stuck with it. That is the condemnation. That is the judgment.
Okay. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying with that take. I just wish the text supported it. Because when non-recording with Gil himself, because like Gil the giant salamander man, he's not like, he's just begging for his life and saying like, oh, I'll go live in the sea, you know. He's not like apologizing for things.
But it's framed like, okay, so it's framed like he's insane to start. He's not that insane. He knows who you are. He knows what you've done. He knows the scenarios and everything. He is aware of his his presence. He has those sorts of things, and that Gil Alexander before that is who's guilty. That Gil Alexander, et cetera, before he becomes the monster, is like, hey, I need you to kill me. That's the guilt. That's what I'm talking about regarding the guilt. Is he's like, oh yeah, I've fucked up a lot. No matter what I say after this point, ignore what I say. I need to be dead. Okay. That's where I'm coming from.
Okay, no, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I get what you're saying. What about you, Aesir? Do you kill or spare Gil Alexander?
So I don't have like a go through playstyle of the game. I've spared him. I've killed him. For me, this is one of those cases though where like this is one of those sort of moral issues with games. It's very similar to I think it's in Mass Effect 2. There's a choice you can make at some point to either erase an entire species of aliens, or you can like mind wipe them of something.
Are you like talking about the Rachni in 1?
It may be. I'm not entirely sure. Like, I've just read about this, but it's like
they have choices like that within. Yeah, the Rachni would be an example. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the genophage.
Like,
isn't there a genophage choice we have?
Yeah, but that's not quite what he's saying. Or maybe like the Geth.
I don't know. But basically, the idea is that it's framed as a good and evil choice, but actually, it's like like a bad and not quite as bad choice. Whereas like, but because it's a game and it's running on these binary systems of good and evil to make choices for the ending, it's like one choice is the good choice, but like that choice is still arguably worse than some of the other bad choices in the game. Yeah,
well, I mean, sometimes good isn't good. Sometimes good is just lesser of evils when you go into those binary things. But then the systems at play in terms of measuring, measuring morality is one of those scenarios where I feel uncomfortable with how morality is played in games. It's not so much the choices you make, but the fact that they want to put a number on it and they want to define what it is. I remember Fallout 3 doing this, where like there are definitive good and bad things you can do, and sometimes it's way more complicated, like the 10 penny tower thing, or thankfully the pit, I'm pretty sure the pit choice regarding the infant isn't numbered like that. And that's a choice where it's like there's a shitty answer no matter how you slice it. So,
yeah.
Fuck.
I just played through Fallout 3 for the first time like a couple of months ago, and I did the 10 penny tower thing. I was like, well, I'll try to like get some sort of peace going. And then when I came back there a few weeks later and all the humans were dead, I was like,
yes.
well, now I need to go on a massacre, don't I?
Yes, and but then the massacre is like, oh, you did something bad. And like technically, no matter what, I guess in a way, massacring anybody is bad. I think killing people is wrong. I should say that. But also in this circumstance, they lied to you. Yes, they lied to you. To go on a spiel here, you let the ghouls into 10 penny tower and they're supposed to coexist. They don't coexist. The ghouls just kill everybody, and then they say fucking beat it, you're a fucking loser. So yeah, there is a catharsis as a player. You're like, what the fuck, I trusted you. What the fuck is this? So
see, like, this is why I think once you attach a morality bar to something like that, it becomes way more problematic than if you just include it and don't make it like a big question of morality. And
yes,
Bioshock 2,
I agree.
Bioshock 2 kind of doesn't, because it isn't good or evil. It's just mercy or vengeance.
Yeah.
And I think that's a much better sort of dynamic, because the idea of good and evil, it is a good sort of literary device, but it doesn't really factor into like real human life, right? Nobody's ever sitting their kid down and being, well, you are evil, you are good. No. But concepts like show mercy, be kind, that's like much more human and relatable.
Yes, and to Murph's sentiment, like that's what passes on, and those are when choices matter, is when they reflect onto our children or the world itself. Like what we do good in the world or the mercy we give, it matters so much more than just like, do your choices matter?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, whatever.
Uh-huh.
I want to focus on this because this is my sticky point. I hate the Eleanor Lamb stuff. I think it doesn't pay off super well. Actually, that collectivist thing doesn't work very well. I like it when it's still personal. I like the Mark Meltzer stuff, for instance.
I love Mark
Meltzer stuff.
One of my favorite NPCs in any video game.
Yeah, he's fantastic. And those are the sort of areas where I like Sophia Lamb's presence and all of that, but as a grand total, it doesn't play out super well. I like the Big Sisters. I will say we should talk about the Big Sisters as the ultimate unique enemy type, because they're sort of an addition to the Big Daddies, where it's like the little sisters have grown up and now they defend little sisters.
Yeah.
And they are much tougher than a Big Daddy, and they are sort of the boss you fight when you've done all the little sisters in an area, and you really have to prepare for them. I enjoy them. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, I think they are a genius sort of addition to the world design.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, it's 20 years later. What happened to all the little sisters?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And then, like, they go on the surface and they're stealing other children, and it's like, damn, that's kind of creepy.
Yeah, and it must be said that this game had a great ARG leading up to it, called Something in the Sea. That's where Mark Meltzer comes from. It was like, I think that went on for like almost a year. Like every month you would load up into this sort of like virtual office, and every month there would be like new puzzles to solve, and you'd be reading like articles about children being stolen. And then that proved, I came in like at the tail end of it, where it's like Mark's on like a boat in the Arctic, and there's like dead splicers on his boat because they keep coming up in bathyspheres to raid him. And then that proved so popular that he was retroactively added into the game. And he was nearly replaced Sinclair as like your companion.
Really?
Oh yeah. Like that's just how popular that ARG was. And yeah, like the fact that you are following like in his footsteps through the entire game, I love that. And the choice, do you know the sign that which Big Daddy is him in Fontaine Futuristics?
It says
I don't.
No. Before you even kill him, your reticle hovering over him is green.
Oh.
And that's like that. Once you know which one is him, to me, that's the actual hardest choice in the game. Whether or not to kill him or let him live on with like his daughter.
His daughter.
In this sort of
that's interesting.
as close to a father-daughter relationship as they're going to get. And that leans more into what Aesir was saying, because that's not a choice that's commented on. That's not a choice that leaves an impression. But, you know, it is something that I personally grapple with as a choice to do. Going back to the Big Sister stuff, but Aesir, you may not know this, but Brogan, do you know that my brain is smooth as a marble? Do you know that I'm a dummy?
I know. Look, we don't talk about it.
This is I've played this game 7 times. This is the very first time I made the connection between Big Sister and Big Brother.
Oh my God, Murph, you're stupid.
Like Sophia Lamb says, Big Sister is watching. I'm like, oh, hey, that's like Big Brother is what? Oh. There
you go, Murph. You figured it out eventually. As long as you figure it out, you know. But even then, it doesn't necessarily play super well. It's always the personal aspects that flare or like that really work for me. I guess the other one to talk about, and we talked about it just briefly because Aesir talked about it, was Sinclair. And I think Sinclair works when it comes to its legacy of untrustworthy companion narrators. So like the Atlas and the Shodans or whatever, like even when they're obvious, it's like, oh, it still plays out just the same or whatever. For Sinclair, it's very obvious he's a huckster, he's a cheat, and he'll do a bunch of unethical things, but at the end he's still like, I want to preserve my humanity, go ahead and kill me, etc., etc.
Yeah. The twist is that there is no twist. Well, the thing with Sinclair is there's a lot of deleted audio diaries, or well, I guess calls. Originally the ending was going to be Sinclair was going to fight back as a Big Daddy and be the one to actually drop Persephone into the trench to stop Lamb. There's these unused audio of him like saying goodbye, and like it flavors differently based again on how he saw you as Alpha or as Delta. So, and that's like I think the closest thing it gets to utilizing Sophia Lamb's philosophy, because her view is that humans need to be controlled because they are inherently will fight for themselves. And then Sinclair, who throughout the game embodies as the guy who is entirely in self-interest, does a selfless act, and that's what undoes her.
Yeah. That's fair. And And there's multiple times where Sophia Lamb tries to create characters such as Sinclair or such as Alexander
Gil
Alexander, bleh, where they sort of embody her utopian ideals, and they sort of come out, I think personally, still preserving the self. I think one of the themes of the game, when you go to the Big Daddy, where you go to all of these elements, is no matter how much you try to push in, and you'll still learn from your environment, you'll still learn from the memories of your ancestors or your fathers or your mothers or the world itself. There is still a sense of self within you that will always try to be there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. How do you guys feel about Sophia Lamb as an antagonist?
I like her, but I feel like she's more of a Silent Hill villain than she is a Bioshock villain. She feels like she's in the wrong game.
I can buy that. Is it the cult angle?
It probably is. It's also just like, I don't know. It probably just is that. It's like very Dahlia Gillespie, where it's like, my daughter is a special daughter, and I'm gonna use her to rebirth paradise.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally see
like,
that.
Oh
yeah.
my god! And you're playing as her father.
Oh
Her father. Wow, Bioshock 2 just is Silent Hill 1, isn't it?
Yeah, that makes sense. It all plays that, yeah.
And by extension,
Wow.
Bioshock Infinite.
Yeah, well,
It's like poetry, they rhyme. Wait, is there a lighthouse in Silent Hill 1?
Yes.
Always
there
a
is.
man,
You
always
find
a
one of
lighthouse.
The seals of Metatron.
Okay. What I like about Sophia
Holy
Lamb,
shit.
because Sophia Lamb, I think I like Sophia Lamb as an antagonist over Ryan and Fontaine, and it's really just for small, like, personal reasons. I think she better embodies an antagonist that's, like, actually personal to the character you're playing, whereas Fontaine and Ryan feel more like ciphers for the philosophy that the game is grappling with.
they're less characters and more talking heads.
Yeah,
About the
and what I
things they're
love about
talking
Sophia Lamb is, like, she just monologues at you constantly, but like I said, there's nothing in the text that shows that Delta understands what she is saying. So I just love this idea of her just talking into a microphone to a wall.
But that's also an interesting case of like, because Ken Levine once said something, and a lot of people have sort of taken him to task for it, where he was asked specifically about Bioshock as like a critique of objectivism, and his comment was that it isn't. I'm not critiquing objectivism so much as just ideologue. The idea that you have a philosophy and you completely zone out from feedback to reality, and you just keep going on with this philosophy.
Yeah.
People have taken him to task for this, for being like afraid of saying anything in particular. But I think, like, I very much disagree with that. I think if you look at Bioshock 1 as a critique of objectivism, it doesn't quite land.
Yeah.
Because of what we talked about earlier, where like the characters, these are the villains in Ayn Rand stories, and they're supposed to build the objectivist paradise. But if you look at it as, no, these are just people who get an idea in their head, and then they just go with it, and they just lose their minds with it. Like Steinman, who abandons the idea of symmetry, or Sandra Cohen, who's just creating monstrosities, and he calls it art.
Yeah,
Right? And
it's
I think-
about moral absolutism. Black and white
yeah,
thinking.
and just
And that's super reflected in 2 and Infinite to varying degrees. I think Infinite muddies the waters probably too much, and 2 is
Yeah.
probably just not landing in what they're talking about. And I think one of the reasons why people take that to task is just because as a singular entry, they're only, like, Bioshock 1's only commenting on ultimately one ideology, and then as a trilogy you're like, oh no, it is multiple ideologies of that moral absolutism. But people will hone in on that one thing because that's all that really matters to them. You know what I mean?
yeah. I also think a lot of people just really wanted Bioshock to be that, and like you can read Bioshock as that, and it's not like Bioshock is, you know, doing a lot to defend objectivism or anything.
No.
But like that's you have to dig a little deeper. Right? Because he also said something to the effect of, you know, it could have been feudalism or theocracy or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason he landed on objectivism was just because he had been reading a bunch of Ayn Rand at the time, and I think it was specifically that he wanted a city under the ocean, and he needed an ideology which could manufacture that. And it's like, it's so far-fetched that you need somebody with such insane willpower to make it happen. And he was like, oh, objectivism, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, whereas, like, we're going to talk about Infinite really quick. You know, Infinite talks about nationalism, ultimately, and then, obviously, the theocracy as well. And those elements are really weird to land because, he makes an entire country in the sky. It's almost like he secedes. Basically, the idea of, Colombia is they secede from the Union and make a city in the sky. And I don't think that plays nearly as well. And it goes into the willpower and all that stuff. Yeah.
It's really weird in Colombia that they have like this idea of the perfect sort of Colombian society, but for some reason they still they're super racist. But why do they then have so many people of different ethnicities? Like, if you hate the Irish so much, why do you allow them to stay? And it's like, I guess
it's
the
not like
idea
people
is
are
that
easily able to hop a border into Colombia.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, you
exactly.
need,
And it's like
someone to clean the toilets.
I think that's the idea, but it's like, well, I don't know. I feel like that doesn't quite land there.
Well, because racist ideology needs the opposition to exist, you know.
The nationalism aspect of it, yes. It needs an enemy. It needs an enemy, period,
Yeah.
That's probably it.
But it just doesn't play as well in Infinite. Going back to 2, there's a reason we're talking about the other games when we talk about this subject in particular, I guess. Murph's right. Did any of you play the multiplayer?
A little bit.
No.
A little bit back in the day, but it was kind of one of those multiplayers where the meta quickly evolved to one single, kit, and no one ever deviated from that kit. I remember it was the freezing plasmid and the elephant gun. And you were just going around freezing people and one-shotting them.
Yeah, it's not about... It wasn't a game about balance or competition. It was just purely we were able to make one. And that's definitely, looking back at it, that's just an industry... that was an industry plague at the time where it's we need multiplayer in a solo game. Who would buy a solo game? It's who the fuck would buy a Bioshock game for the multiplayer?
Yeah.
Exactly. It's who would buy...
I think that multiplayer did have some, they at least flavored it Bioshock enough. You picked, characters, and then as you leveled them up, you would get audio diaries showing how they, devolved through the war, becoming insane.
It was also themed as the fall of Rapture, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was during the War of Fontaine and Ryan, right?
Yeah.
And then but to defend it really quick, I will say if you don't care about things like balance or meta or actual competition or skill, the game is the game I think it does succeed and execute the idea of a multiplayer shooter based on Bioshock well enough. Yeah, especially in how plasmids function. Yeah.
Is it still active?
No.
Oh.
I think it died almost a decade ago. They actively switched off the servers and the re-release.
And I don't think there's enough people to make its own server. It's dead.
Yeah.
Oof. I loved the what was that DLC called?
Burial at Sea.
Oh
no, Minerva's Den.
It's time to talk about Minerva's Den.
Minerva's Den. Minerva's Den is incredible.
It's great.
Minerva's Den was to me it's the best part. When we talk about ideologies in the personal stories, Minerva's Den is when it really succeeds because it's so short and compact, well designed. The story works from point A to point B. All of it's great.
Yeah.
10 out of 10.
Yeah. That last area in Minerva's Den is a gut punch. I
didn't know because I bought this originally on the PlayStation 3 and I got Bioshock 1 and Bioshock 2 as a duo pack and I just played through those a bunch. Probably for a month I was just replaying those two games and just slowly taking my time through every area. And then when I started fiddling around and I'd walk through, they have an art gallery where you can look at cut concepts and stuff. And then I found oh, Minerva's Den, what's that? And then I pressed it and it's holy shit, there's another game here.
Yeah, because it's buried in the extras menu, which is so weird.
And it's also that laser gun, man. Wow!
Oh, dude, that's such a great weapon.
The laser.
Oh, my
What Minerva's does great as a DLC is it sort of remixes the gameplay you know. So like the
Yeah.
order you pick up the weapons in is real odd.
Yes.
The
Oh,
plasmids
my
you
gosh.
get are like strange. So it's more about like making do with what you have.
Yes. Yep. And like that was the time where I actively enjoyed like to 100% the little sister gameplay loop of collecting Adam. Those environments, those circumstances were just so much fun. Those like were really like specific combat encounters, you know?
Yeah. No, I can see that. No, Minerva's Den is like, I don't know. It's like in terms of length quality ratio, it may be the best of the Bioshock trilogy.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it certainly beats
Yeah,
out
you know-
Burial at Sea, which Brogan and I were kind of talking about
Yeah.
on the break. Ugh.
I remember a lot of like Bioshock Infinite. It's like the game reviewers really wanted to think is great.
Yeah.
We're like on day one, rave reviews, but then as people like it's sort of it's sat in like the popular sort of spotlight for a little bit. People were like, no, wait a minute. Why are you eating food out of the
Trash can.
garbage
Yeah.
of Columbia?
I love that.
And then, like-
one review someone wrote where it's like the history's greatest killer rummages through trash.
Whereas like and like slowly people sort of started picking the game apart.
Yeah.
And I think it's really sad looking at Bioshock Infinite because you look at like the interviews Ken Levine did before the game released, and he's so energized and excited by the prospects, what they're talking about, and you look at the trailers and it's so insane. And then there was like a producer shuffle or something because the game had been delayed for so long, and he basically got told, you either release this or I'm firing you and I'm getting somebody else to release it for you. So they gutted
The
like,
old
the
Final
entire...
Fantasy 13 verses ultimatum.
Ooh. Yeah, but it's like, oh wow, so this interesting gimmick of tears, it basically exists now. Like it used to be that you actually travel to different universes just on the spot, and like you find one whose variables are a bit better into your favor. Now it's all at like fixed story points, and like the actual character stuff was supposed to have massive changes, which you could just act on dynamically. Like, I don't know if you remember this. There's a character in the beginning of Burial at Sea, Part 2, where Elizabeth, she's sort of knocked out.
Yeah.
And there's a guy with a gun looking at her. And
Isn't that
he's
Atlas?
sort of taunt. No. There's another guy doing it, and then Atlas tells him to stop torturing the poor girl. We're not animals. That guy is named Sulcus or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he is actually the politician who's like campaigning in that trailer for
Salt and
Bioshock
Stall.
Infinite. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, I know exactly which character and which demo you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm learning so much about deep Bioshock lore right now. This is crazy.
And like that was just like an optional sort of pocket universe you could go into. But the game has none of that anymore.
Yeah.
So like I really hate crapping too hard on Bioshock Infinite because it isn't the game anybody wanted to make.
Sure.
And then with like the Burial at Sea DLCs, it's like, why is this the direction you're going in? Where like you have this prophetic vision of Jack coming and saving the little sisters.
Yeah, no, it's all right. It's
what?
all right that you get first-person perspective of Elizabeth getting tortured to death. Because
Yeah.
it's fine because Jack's gonna show up, and Bioshock 1 is good.
Yeah.
Um,
I feel like Bioshock 2 and Bioshock Infinite, they're a lot like Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3, where the
Where
second
2 is the
one,
best one, I agree.
well, where the second one is like, I'm gonna take what was set up in the first game, and I'm gonna take that and expand on it in very interesting ways. And then the third game, because that's when you have the original director back, he's like, no. I'm gonna do what I did the first time around, but I'm gonna make it even more overt because you didn't get it the first time.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely a case where, there was a time where Bioshock 2 was considered like the least of the trilogy, and now it's really come around with the
Yeah.
trilogy being free on Epic this week. I've been like going through like Twitter impressions of like people playing it for the first time or like playing it for the first time in 10 years or what have you. And like the general impression is like, oh no, 2 is kind of like the best one. Like just a complete critical reappraisal.
Yeah, I think 2 is a masterpiece. I still prefer the first one though.
I can totally buy that. Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot to say about 1's efforts. I think there's a lot of time where you measure like how they were able to merge that console experience with that immersive sim. Like we were talking about it as like a stumbling block, but like that stumbling block is something to really respect in its own way. And for that, I agree for Bioshock.
I think there's also more sort of isolated moments of really good game direction, like that god awful, horrible, like that flooded moratorium or whatever it is, mortuary or whatever it is, where you're like going through and you see the shadow of a splicer, and then you
with
go into the
doctor
dead end
that appears behind you.
Yeah, after you pick up, what is it, like a frozen plasma or something?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, or that moment where the woman is singing, like talking to her baby,
but it's a gun.
But it's just an empty carriage. It's like moments like that, I think, are where Bioshock 1 is at its best.
Bioshock 2 has the teleportation plasmid.
Yeah.
Way more goofy, way more like when it tries to do a beat, it doesn't try to like have a nice sequence to it. I will say the other thing I don't like about 2 in terms of story, I guess we're still talking about, is I don't like it when it gives me like a Eleanor Lamb shows up. It's like, Father, this is what happened. I'm going to explain to you what happened now. Yeah.
I also think Bioshock 1 has better characters.
Yeah, I would agree.
It was like these characters are much more interesting than what you saw in Bioshock 2, even though Bioshock 2 does have some really interesting characters.
Well, it goes into that personal journey versus those different things, whereas like when we talk about the ideologies of Bioshock 1, those different people living within the city of Bioshock 1, number one, it felt fresh and new, but also like we're much more about emphasizing the setting. Whereas like in 2, the best parts of 2 when it's an NPC or another character is when it's all personal. Like I don't think it necessarily informs or makes Rapture better. You know what I mean?
Well, since we're getting on with the length of this, I do have a lingering question, because there are rumors constantly swirling, and they're getting more prominent as the years go on, of like a new Bioshock coming. So my question is, do you guys think that there needs to be a new Bioshock or like a shock game? And what would you want from that?
Oh.
Who wants to go first?
You go first.
All right. Number one, I'm very cynical when it comes to sequels. I'm of the opinion that sequels will happen. They probably won't be good. I hope they are good, and I don't necessarily get outraged when I see it. Right? So like that's how I approach like almost everything. Like, oh, there's a new Star Wars. Oh, there's a new Silent Hill. Oh, well, it's gonna happen. No matter what's gonna happen, creative disease, etc., etc. I would prefer, what I would want is something obviously new. Maybe remove the name Bio in the shock. Maybe go back to more of the techie future roots. It doesn't necessarily have to be space. It could just be like Tron-esque or some shit. That'd be cool. But stuff like that, I would like that. Do I need it? No. Does it need to happen? No. That's it.
A lot of the I think most of the Bioshock staff has, I think most of them have left.
Yeah.
I know there's a bunch of the studio. Remember that game where you play as like a blind guy or a blind woman, and you're just like using echolocation to walk around? That was made by Bioshock staffers. There's another, there've been a lot of games which have been made by Bioshock staffers, which are like this is kind of like Bioshock. It's like this aspect of Bioshock. I don't think any of those games have had a real sort of critical, just, yes, this is the team. This is maybe Gone Home. I think Gone Home was made by some Bioshock staffers.
It was made by the Minerva's Den people.
Yeah.
And I really like that. But I feel like we haven't gotten that sort of home run, yes, this is a really expertly directed game in the vein of Bioshock. And Ken Levine still works at 2K, but he's doing his own thing, and that's in development hell and has been for a long time.
For 9
so
years.
Yeah. So for another Bioshock, it's, well, who are you going to get for this, right? Is this, we're going to do another Silent Hill game. Oh, great. Which of the team, who of Team Silent is coming back? Just Akira Yamaoka?
Yeah.
Because that doesn't work. So I'm very skeptical that you're going to, be able to capture that sort of Bioshock sense. As for what would I want? I'm one of those. I'm in the minority. I don't want a city on the moon. I don't want a city on the bottom of the earth. I just go back to Rapture. Check in on Rapture in 1980. Do Ronald Reagan, where he's like, Gorbachev, open the door. It's like, hey, Ryan, open the lighthouse.
Rapture gets nationalized. You know what? That is an angle.
It's more like just I don't care about there's always a lighthouse, there's always a city, because that's okay, so
there's no teeth.
Yeah, well, it's just you can't just change the variable and still have a great game.
Yeah.
Bioshock isn't great because it followed this formula.
Mm-hmm.
Bioshock is great because it's an expertly directed game.
Yeah.
And I'd like to go back to Rapture. Do Rapture 20 years from the second one and see just how much worse things can get.
You know what annoys me the hell off about the there's always a lighthouse, there's always a man, there's always a city, or whatever that line is?
Huh?
That because Infinite ignores 2's existence, there's only 2 games in which there's a lighthouse, a man, and a city. You can't say there's a trend.
Yeah.
I personally I think I am of the opposite of Aesir. I am one of those people that's shock game is when fucked up city. I don't feel I need to go back to Rapture. I think that's, to me, that would be kind of nostalgia pandering. Oh, it's a return to form. We're going back to Rapture. I'd rather new things.
Well, you say that, but I'll defend it real quick. I think if it's a shallow thing of we're going back to Rapture in the same way it's fucking Star Wars. Hey, look, it's the Millennium Falcon. That's when it goes bad. That's when it's all bad. But then again, Aesir mentioned fucking Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
There is a political bend to that where it's Ronald Reagan and those neocons back in the 80s used Ayn Rand. They did. They said this shit's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And they weren't even necessarily adherents to Ayn Rand. They were just neocons that wanted fucking free trade and let's just fucking,
Yeah.
and that led to its own ruins and that led to its own commentary.
Did you know, have you ever heard about Ayn Rand's relationship with Ronald Reagan? She passed away. She passed away before he was president. I think she passed away in 78 or something. Mm-hmm. And I believe she's quoted as saying that Ronald Reagan is the greatest charlatan in American political history.
Yeah, no, I did know that, yeah, now that you say that.
Yeah, and it's you're whoa. Because Ayn Rand is one of these people who's she's very much scrutinized for what people want her to be, rather than especially who she is. Because she's not just another right-winger. If you're on the left and you don't like right-wing politics, it's very easy to sort of group people together like that. She really isn't that. Ayn Rand was fighting for gay marriage back in the 50s. She was talking against segregation. She was a fierce critic of America's foreign policy. She was talking about the right for a woman to have an abortion. And people fall differently on that. But this, to just group her with all those other people that you may or may not like, it's very unfair. She was a very sort of unique voice within that crowd.
Well, okay, so when we talk about voice, I think we're going to try to put a cap on this at some point. But when we talk about voices and philosophies and all that, that's when I'm talking about the Ronald Reagan stuff. It's when a politician says it, a politician's thinking about what agendas they can use. And it's sort of when you take a philosophy, especially a philosophy like Ayn Rand's, there's elements of social liberation. A true libertarian doesn't, is about that social freedom to get an abortion, et cetera, et cetera. And those don't necessarily reflect when a politician is pointing to the book saying, hey, look, I've read the book, I like this book, etc., etc. They'll have their own agendas to it, and that could also go into their ideologies and the nightmares Ronald Reagan rapture could bring.
What you could also just do like Bioshock Cold War, where it's like the Ruskies and the Americans both get into rapture, and it's just like these influence campaigns that are operating against one another, and maybe you could do it more as like a Pillars of Eternity kind of RPG.
Yeah, like
where
they've
it's
built
more
a
about
new rapture on the bones of the old.
Yeah,
That
and
would
it's
be
kind of like
interesting.
these opposing external forces are like injecting rapture with like this lifeline of we'll keep you alive, but you have to sort of follow our interests, and then you're just somebody in rapture who sort of, because like the shit thing about a Cold War is that you two have a big issue, and now it's the world's problem because you can't just find a way to live together. And that's kind of like, you can make that the story of another Bioshock, where it's like, well, these two influential superpowers are both trying to direct rapture, and now that's everybody's problem who lives down here.
And then that could go into the choices of the individual, but then it's extrapolated to like a city or a country can't make its own choices. When we look at, the world as it is today, there's a lot of countries that don't have actual power in decision making in terms of global politics or their own identities. There's always a hand in the pot, as it were. Yeah.
Yeah. You could do something like that. I think what I want, if we get another Bioshock, I really want it to be more sort of role-playing focused. And like sequence shiftable based on character relationships and stuff like that. I think Bioshock is ripe for digging really getting into that sort of meaty role-playing.
Something more like Disco Elysium and Rapture.
I'm thinking more New Vegas because I still haven't played Disco Elysium. People tell me I would love that game.
It's really good. I personally really enjoy Disco Elysium.
I was once told that it's so great. You can play as, you can take all these different sort of political leanings, and the game accommodates it. You can be a socialist. You can be a conservative, or you can even be a racist. And it's like, yes, the three politics.
Yeah. Disco Elysium rewards and incentivizes doubling down on your character's political beliefs.
It's more just, I thought that was a really funny way of putting it.
Yeah.
Where it's like the three politics: socialism, conservatism, racism.
That sounds about right. No, I'm just kidding. I would recommend it to anyone. I would recommend Bioshock 2 to anyone. I would recommend, even if I don't like it as much, I'd recommend Bioshock Infinite to anyone. I like games where you could have conversations about it afterwards.
I think, Infinite's a good game to deconstruct.
Yeah. They say one of the best things you can do in any, like if you're trying to be a musician or like a movie maker or a game designer, I think the best thing you can do is to look at something that doesn't work and break down why it doesn't work. And I think Bioshock Infinite is great for that, where you can really sort of, especially because you have two preceding games which are much better in a very similar vein, you can really come to understand why tight direction, why really doubling down on good design decisions, why that stuff matters. So yeah, I would recommend Bioshock Infinite.
All right. Well, if we wanted to recommend you, Aesir, and your content, where might people find that?
You can find me on YouTube at YouTube. Just
at
Google,
YouTube.
Just at YouTube. I was gonna be like at youtube.com/AesirAesthetics. I don't think I have that. I think mine is like at youtube.com/ go and get that bread, everyone. Wink, wink, or something, some nonsense like that. And the problem is, I've linked my YouTube account on so many different places that if I change it now, I'm going to have to find everywhere I'm linked and fix that too.
Okay.
But just go on YouTube, AesirAesthetics. I'm also on Twitter, same handle. I think that's twitter.com/AesirAesthetics. But there's another guy who's like a former heroin addict, now bodybuilder.
What?
Who also calls himself AesirAesthetics.
Oh, no.
And I don't know if he has the handle.
Oh, no.
Maybe you should have rethought it. Oh, it's too late now. What's done is done. You've made your choices.
I've been AesirAesthetics for longer than him, and I have more followers. So I feel like I should get the handle, not him.
That's where your objectivist Ayn Rand ideology's coming in, Aesir.
Is a man not entitled to the handle of his Twitter?
Yeah. That's
It all comes full circle.
Wait, you also have a podcast, right?
Well, we plugged that at the start.
I never pluck that. It's the Essays and Espresso podcast. I'm the best one. There are 3 of us who do that podcast together. I'm the best one.
How do the other 2 feel about that?
Weight. Dead weight. I tell them probably weekly that it's my way or the highway.
Oh. No. Damn, maybe this Ayn Rand thing is getting out of hand. No, I'm just kidding. Murph's the best one out of this podcast. Murph, what do we have?
We have twingeeks.com, where you can find regular articles about contemporary and independent cinema, as well as podcasts relating to that. Brogan, you just finished up a guest spot on the Twin Geeks podcast.
Ralph Bakshi.
Talking about Ralph Bakshi. First time I'd ever heard of American Pop. Or what that
it was amazing. Must see movie.
Yeah, I need to seek that out. That sounds like great. That sounds great.
Is he the guy who did those old Lord of the Rings movies?
Yeah.
He did the original. The other Lord of the Rings movies were Rankin and Bass, but yes.
Yeah. And then we also have I'm Thinking of Spoiling Things, which covers movies in theaters right now. I may have been scheduled for an upcoming movie.
Top Gun?
Nope. It's going to be Elvis, most likely.
Oh, God. All right, well, here we go.
And then, I don't even need to say the other ones. Don't Let the Modern Cast Get You, which covers the movies of Modern Media, micro-budget movies made by the ever-wonderful Matt Farley, man of 32,000 songs.
And, wait, Murph, what is our next episode?
So, you're putting it on me this time because you messed it up.
Whoa, I didn't mess it up.
Next time, we're going to do a bit of a half and half special. It's going to be covering the legacy and fall of E3 with our good buddy Calvin, who has covered E3s in the past. And we'll also, in the theme of legacy, we will be talking about Blood Omen, Legacy of Kain.
Wow. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, AesirAesthetics, for coming on. This has been a good episode.
Yeah.
I think this has been a good episode. I've done a lot of shit podcasts in my day. This ain't one of them.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll take that.
Write that on the box.
Yeah.
I think we're done. It's playing.
All right.